Doctors confess their most cringe moments with patients of the opposite gender. My classmate and I were at a free clinic performing our first ever pelvic exams on standardized patients. Classmate's a big woman pillager of a man and gets to go first. He proceeds to just insert his fingers to palpate for the bimanual exam. Our poor standardized patient shrieks right away. She promptly states that for all women's sake, he's going to need to use one finger for those procedures from now on. One of my friends was getting a physical for a high school sport, I believe, and when it came time for them to check his twig and berries, the doctor says, cough, but apparently my friend thought he said hop. So here my friend is standing there, the doctor has my friend's boys in his hands, and my friend just jumps. He said it was the most embarrassing moment of his life. My granduncle is a urologist, and I got rigid downstairs from checking out one of his nurses when I was around 12. I then had to explain why I couldn't drop my trousers for an examination. He asked if I wanted to go to the bathroom to do something about that so we can continue the examination. I had no idea what that particular act he was suggesting was, and he explained rather vaguely to me the gist of the operation. I didn't feel like trying it, so we just sort of waited until it went away. I don't know if it was awkward for him, but whenever I think about it, I cringe myself into the fetal position until I can block it out again. I had to put a Foley into a male part. I'm young and female. He seemed nervous as I started. Right when I was about to insert the catheter with his wee-wee in my left hand and the catheter in my right, he abruptly asked if it would help if he was rigid for the procedure and proceeded to gain some girth before I could answer. I then said no. Doctor here recently walked in on a new mother in a sitz bath with 2 chest pumps gulping away at her, all while her husband grins from ear to ear as I worked her up for a pubic bone injury. The newborn could sense my embarrassment. If it makes you feel any better, when I had my son, I couldn't have cared less if Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade trooped through my room. All sense of modesty went right out the door, and I cared F all who saw what part of me during my time in the hospital. If you were there to help me, have at it. And thanks for all you do, Doc. We appreciate it. We're taught to explain to patients exactly what we're doing as we're doing it. Delicate wording becomes important during female pelvic exams. Instead of, okay, I'm going to place the speculum inside now so you'll just feel some warm pressure, my buddy ended up saying, okay, I'm coming inside you now. The female patient responds, oh, no thanks, I've already got 3 children. Yep, I imagine the sheer irritation alone would lead to me using the most clinical possible terms just because I'd get sick of all of these sorts of lewd jokes. I'm not a doctor, but a pharmacy technician. About a year ago, a young woman comes in very upset and turns in a prescription for a bunch of anti-anxiety and anti-psychosis medications. All's going well until I realize we're out of one of them, and I have to tell her I have to order it for the next day. She was okay with that at first, but when I see the tears building, I ask if she's okay, and she says yes. So I continue typing up the prescriptions. I wanted to say there were about 8 or 9. Next thing I know, she begins crying. She starts telling me that she's just been released from a psych ward and she tried to end things a couple of weeks back. She rolled up her sleeves and her arms were covered in a lattice of scars. She began to ask me if she thought she'd ever get reaccepted to nursing school because apparently they kick you out after getting admitted to a hospital for psychological symptoms. I had no idea what to tell her except I hoped she got in and that if she worked hard, they should give her a chance. I know this might all sound hollow, but I wasn't prepared for that. Nothing in pharmacy tech training told me how to react to this. So this was definitely my most awkward moment with the opposite gender. I'm a nurse, trying to insert a catheter on a guy with a microdiddle or an inverted one for that matter. When you get a vasectomy, you get your Johnson taped to your stomach. A nurse came in to do the finishing after the procedure. She was middle-aged, and I'm guessing she probably got into nursing late because she was looking really nervous and uncomfortable, and anyone who's been in nursing more than a few years has had hands-on eggplant experience. She's kind of tentative and unsure about pulling the tape off, so I say, go ahead, it's been through a lot in its time. She got a big smile and ripped that thing off of there, so she's totally cool in my book. 3rd year of medical school on my family medicine rotation, which I'm doing on my med school's campus academic health center. Electronical record shows a 24-year-old with chief complaint of cough, so I go in to interview her, where it comes to light she's really down there for downstairs itching. Finish up the interview and tell her I'm going to grab my attending for the pelvic exam. My attending tells me she'll let me do the pelvic if the patient consents. I'd already done OB and gyn at this point and was quite comfortable with it, but we both agreed that I'd likely get asked to leave the room altogether. Lo and behold, the patient consents, I do the pelvic, we write her a script for some antifungals and she goes home. 2 days later, I'm teaching a small group of first-year students how to perform an abdominal physical exam. Teaching's a requirement for the family medicine rotation. Then, during introductions, I come face-to-face with my patient who never mentioned she was a first-year student. We both play it off really cool at first, but during the session, her partner asks me to show him how to do an ingenual femoral hernia examination on a female patient, aka his partner. While I'm doing my exam, she breaks out in hysterical laughter, which causes me to lose it and start laughing at the absurdity of the situation as well. She played it off like she was ticklish, and I said something stupid like, "I thought of something funny, don't mind me." 2 weeks later, she returns to the clinic for a follow-up, and I go see her. We talk for a while about how she's feeling, how awkward our second meeting was, and then just shoot the breeze for a bit. And then she goes, "So, when are you going to take me out for dinner?" I politely declined and explained I had a girlfriend at the time, and I never saw her again. In short, I did a pelvic exam on a girl who ended up being a fellow medical student, though 2 years behind me, and she asked me on a date at her follow-up appointment. Nice bedside manner, you'll go far. Maybe not deep, but definitely far. My perspective may be off the scope for this group of stories, since I'm a veterinarian, not a medical doctor. In my experience, people who don't want to neuter their male dogs are always males. Having a frank discussion about the benefits of neutering with someone who's emotionally attached to their dog's testes is pretty awkward. My first pap smear was at the Planned Parenthood when I was like 15. The male doctor got me positioned and then turned around to grab the speculum and said, "This is gonna be cold, quack quack," in a Daffy Duck voice and using the speculum like a duck's bill. Oh god. Not a doctor, a student rad tech. Had a patient for a regular chest x-ray series, but she was coughing up sputum. I asked her if she wanted a tissue to cough it up into, and she said she didn't spit, she was a swallower, and winked at me. I'm 19. She was 98. Working in ED at a large hospital without any pediatrics or OB-GYNs. Just about to finish night shift when I'm asked by a nurse to quickly see an 18-year-old with abdominal pain. I was exhausted and didn't want to pick up another patient, but I just had a weird feeling. Went to see her. She was a thin girl lying in bed under the covers in the fetal position with her worried mother nearby. I ran through a brief history and was about to examine her when she stated she needed to go to the bathroom. She looked to be in a lot of pain, so I asked for a nurse to escort her. At this point, the patient, her mum, and myself thought it was a burst appendix. Next thing I know, the nurse yanks me down the corridor and shoves me into the bathroom. Before me stands a thin 18-year-old girl bearing down in a squat with a now noticeable baby bump, repeating, "Don't tell mom, don't tell mom, don't tell mom." I throw her into a nearby bed and charge into the resus area, leaving the mum unbeknownst in her cubicle. I grab my boss, who goes white and starts shouting, "Why is she here? Why is she here?" Understandable, we're not the obstetric hospital. We run back in, by which time she's fully dilated and pushing. We successfully deliver a beautiful baby boy whilst constantly freaking out about the lack of pediatric supplies. We didn't even have clips for the umbilical cord, but we improvised. Throughout this time, the girl is either pushing or begging us not to tell her mum while we keep saying, "She drove you here, you can't hide a gosh darn baby." The girl wanted to keep the baby, and ultimately we convinced her to tell her mum. I told her mum her daughter was safe, but there was something I needed to show her. The look when I brought the mum into the resus room was unlike anything I've ever seen. Anger mixed with concern, mixed with joy, mixed with confusion. What a crazy frickin' day that was. In short, some doctors structure their careers to avoid babies and vajayjays, but you can never truly get away. Oh my god. Well, maybe that's the universe telling you to change your calling. But seriously, I hope that girl and her mum were able to sort things out in a way that was best for her and her new kid. How much important prep and planned parenting did that girl miss with keeping the baby under wraps? Being a resident in Saudi Arabia, there's a huge stigma attached to male attendings examining female patients, especially those with gynecological issues. Also, being a foreigner residing here, some customs and practices catch me completely off guard at times. That being said, I was once in charge of my consultant's OPD during an OB-GYN rotation, said consultant having left early thinking all major cases and appointments had been dealt with, and left me to clean up any stragglers in the last hour. In walks a 40-ish-year-old mother with her 18-year-old daughter, both completely covered from head to toe in coverings, who then proceed to throw a tantrum about how the consultant wasn't there for her appointment, and how she left a male resident in charge of the OPD. A cursory examination of the daughter's file didn't reveal any history which would have helped me decide if my superior should get involved. I then began to try to talk her down, asking her what the appointment was about, and how I was in charge of the department. I didn't dare reveal that I was just a lowly resident. I reassured her I'd do everything in my power to help her out with any issues her daughter had been having. After a lengthy conversation, I found out that the daughter was there for a virginity verification, because she was to be engaged and subsequently married off that month. And appointments in my hospital's OPD are a real hassle to get. They needed to present that certificate of virginity along with some other things regarding finances, genealogy, and a few others to the prospective groom during the engagement ceremony. I went completely numb, detached, and examined the poor girl silently. She was in the stirrups, undressed from the waist down, and a burqa above that. Not even an eye slit. I discovered, for the first time, a stack of thick, extremely official-looking certificates in a desk drawer to be given to women who passed the examination. I've since performed that exam close to 30 times and have seen quite a few females who didn't have an intact, shall we say, maidenhead for YouTube, and who actually sobbed quietly in shame during the examination. I try to explain to the family that the rupture of this particular thing is in no way a sign of promiscuity or even any bedroom interaction. To those people who I know wouldn't understand, I just certify their daughters' virginities and tell the girl to come up with an excuse later to their families. Damn, if someone tells on me, I'm going to be facing one hell of a malpractice suit. Idiots are idiots everywhere, no matter what country. You would not believe some of the crap that happens in India, Pakistan, or even China with women. This is a product of ignorance and plain patriarchal stupidity, with vanilla selfishness at its center. I might have seen some crap, but I've met some amazing people too, with infinite love, wisdom, and courage in my days working in Saudi Arabia. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Not me, but a fellow classmate in medical school. We have mock exams and various people will sign up to be patients. They get paid a decent amount. So he went into the mock exam room and started the basic history and physical of the fairly attractive female. Did this and that pretty standard stuff, grabbed a tongue depressor and had her open her mouth. Then, nothing. He did it again, and said with bewilderment, "Oh, that's weird, you don't have a gag reflex." She smiled and gave him a coy wink. He just about lost it and couldn't finish. He walks out and finds the preceptor who monitors the exam while rolling on the floor laughing. As for me, I never really had an overly awkward experience other than maybe knowing someone, which can make certain exams a little awkward. But wait, I've just thought of one. I was in my OB-GYN rotation and this young redhead came in for warts downstairs. Let's just say that the curtains matched the carpet and, pun intended, she was a bonfire down there. So me and my preceptor at the time were looking for warts in the forest down there. We'd find one, freeze it, and find another, freeze that. I get lost in the moment and forget where I was, as I was a student and hadn't yet fully developed a professional composure. I saw one and said, "Oh, I found a big one too." Realizing what I'd said, I looked up from between her legs as she looked down, and we locked eyes. The embarrassment in her eyes is something I'll never forget. I felt like a giant jerk. I was the chaperoning nurse. Young doctor, first week in the OB, and was seeing an early pregnancy patient in triage. Doctors usually say, "I'm going to put my hands on your V area now," or "You'll feel the speculum on your L lips." Obviously, they can use much more specific language than we can use on YouTube. He was rattled and so nervous that he conflagrated them as, "I'm going to put my lips on your vajayjay now." The patient and I roared with laughter for a second before we controlled ourselves. He shakily kept his dignity and kept right on going like nothing had happened. He never referred to it again for the 4 years he was there. General surgeon, 31-year-old female for context. I work in a county hospital taking care of very salt-of-the-earth patients. These are my people, as I was also born with a plastic spork in my mouth. Talking one morning to a young man who was about to get his ingenual hernia fixed, and his only question to me was, "Well, when can we do the deed again?" The only person with him was his girlfriend, who was smoking hot, so I broke him the bad news. "Well, you're going to wake up feeling like a horse kicked you right square in the junk, so go ahead and do what you want when you feel you want to, but it's not going to be today." We get him to the OR, put him under general anesthesia, and then a very new, very young, very pretty female nurse starts to prep him. To those unfamiliar, this involves rigorously scrubbing down the downstairs area, including all the associated extremities and hangers-on, with what amounts to a sponge on a hollow stick that dispenses a compound that decontaminates the skin somewhat. As soon as she starts scrubbing, the patient pops a rager. He's completely under and paralyzed, mind you, but the more she cleans, the bigger it gets, and yeah, this kid was a shower to begin with, I tell you what. Poor thing, this nurse's face just gets redder and redder, and it gets bigger and bigger, and everyone's giving her crap the whole time. I finally stop her because I'm afraid any second he's going to break, scrub, and contaminate my field. We do our best to drape around old Ron Jeremy. It was hard. My poor, married with kids and straight as far as I know, male resident had to keep batting the damned thing out of our field during the whole case. Afterwards, I made sure to reiterate to the hot girlfriend that he probably wouldn't feel like doing the deed in the near future. She asked me point blank if it was okay if she went south of the border on him, and I told her to go nuts. He asked me the same question when he woke up from anesthesia, and when I gave him the same answer, he gave me a knuckle bump in reply. God, I love county folk. Okay, are you sure you didn't operate on an actual horse? In seriousness, I guess it makes sense on why they were so fixated on this particular post-surgery activity now. We used liquid nitrogen to freeze downstairs warts off a 20-something-year-old girl. After she touched her warts with her hands to show me where they were, I applied cryotherapy and left the room for a moment so she could get dressed. When I got back, she proceeded to grab my hand and shake it, after touching all of her warts, without washing her hands. I could have gotten drunk off the alcohol absorbed through my skin from the amount of hand sanitizer I used after that particular incident. Patient here. I was in a small town where my parents used to live and I had to see a gynecologist. I was worried that I might have a tampon stuck in my vajayjay. And public service announcement, that's not physically possible, but I didn't know that at the time. Unfortunately, the only doctor that I could see was a friend of my parents. After thoroughly probing and peeking, he informed me that there was nothing wrong. In fact, your downstairs is, for a lack of a better word, gorgeous. I've never been so embarrassed. I had to babysit his kids that weekend. My pediatrician used to substitute his old male doctor sometimes without notifying anyone. It was almost always the days I was coming in for my sports physical. That feel when you're going to get your hanging swimmer's storage touched by a lady doctor in your early teens and then seeing an old man snapping latex gloves on. I had one patient who made her desire for me very public, but since I treated her entire family, I decided not to kick her out and continued to remain professional. In the midst of a bipolar mania, she kept complaining of female issues. During her pelvic exam, I happened to look up and I saw a gigantic smile on her face. After the exam, in the hallway in front of the few residents, she said, "If you weren't my doctor, I'd F your brains out." Perhaps I should have mentioned this earlier, but she was the only woman I've ever met who was a 0 out of 10. She's the only patient who made me question my heterosexuality. Somewhat related, but from a patient's perspective. When I was in nursing school, I went to my school's student health center for a gyno appointment. The doctor asked me if it was all right if a medical student was present, and I said that was fine. She then specifies the student was male and asks me if that's still okay. I wasn't totally comfortable with that, but as a nursing student, I knew how much it sucks when a patient refuses you, so I said yes. Lo and behold, it was an incredibly attractive med student from my school who I bumped into all the time, and he saw inside of me. I never could look him in the eye after that. A lot of people are commenting that he or I should have refused. Look, I didn't actually know the guy, I just knew him as a hot stranger, and I think I became much more aware of his presence after this occurred. When I was 16, I sometimes got dizzy if I stood up really fast. I'm pretty sure this is relatively normal, but my mum thought something was off with me. So she took me to the doctor and he wanted to check for testicular cancer. I had a worried look on my face because I didn't want an old Asian man feeling my berries. The doctor saw my face and thought it might console me if he spoke teenager. He said, with his thick Asian accent, "I'm gonna feel you up downstairs." I felt pretty awkward after that. Was it Ken Jeong by any chance? I'm not a doctor, but I'm a nurse that mostly deals with wounds. I had a patient once who suffered from Fournier gangrene, and please don't look it up if you don't want to wash your eyeballs out. He'd already been through surgery and reconstruction with skin grafts to the whole area, and I was seeing him twice daily to redress some residual but substantial open areas around his downstairs equipment, down the sides of his groin and thigh, up his abdomen, and on his scrot. In short, the guy's equipment had recently rotted away, been skinned down, and then had donor skin from his thighs stapled on. At any rate, as I'm scrubbing away, my face about a foot away from his painfully swollen and misshapen bits, he becomes rigid. I wouldn't even notice because his edema was so bad. It didn't even occur to me that it would happen because I was scrubbing the open areas and jamming Q-tips under bits. He moaned and I asked if he was in pain, which he usually was, and he goes, well, no, it's just different. That didn't even clue me in. The wife had to mention something. Ugh, well that's just frickin' great. My doctor once said, "You're so thin it's easy to palpate your organs," and then he felt my spine from the front. It was awkward. When I was in nursing school, my lab partner was a Kenyan marathon runner. He was so skinny our teacher used to use him as an example all the time because you could literally see his heart beating through his chest in his intercostal spaces. And where his lungs were a little overdeveloped from running, he could take a deep breath and you could almost see the outline of his liver. He always had to take his shirt off and let people prod and grab him. ER in Brazil. 20-year-old woman receives a knife cut in the chest. Slices both of her mammary glands across. Superficial injury, but it needed stitches. No plastic surgeon. It's a sus ER in Brazil. We started the procedure. You like them, don't you? If you make them pretty again, you could play with them all you want. The nurse was mortified. This would go on for 45 minutes. As soon as the next doctor on schedule arrived, I was ending the stitches and referred her to the other doctor, and I noped out there.
Hey, psst, over here. What black market do kids at your school run?
I used to deal in whiteboard markers for teachers in high school. One teacher had a tendency to hoard them, leaving none for other teachers. I would take markers from him and provide them to other teachers in need. While there was no formal payment, I was given a little bit more leniency at times, e.g., request to leave the classroom for a moment. Once the marker would start squealing on the whiteboard because it was almost empty, I'd get teachers giving me a nod as if to say, "You got the goods?" I'd then supply them with the marker color of their choosing, usually black. It was actually a lot of fun, and I never heard teachers talk about my systems or chastise me for taking markers. I was in elementary school when pogs were big. Everyone had cool slammers and stuff, but I didn't have money for good ones. My dad made one out of half-inch mild steel for me and used an engraving pen to make a simple pattern. Everyone was asking me where I got them from. I didn't want to lose my unfair edge, but I also knew I could make money. My dad had a big sheet of this half-inch steel. I told them I was the only one who could get them. I sold them for $15 a pop. My dad kept 10, I got 5. And that's when I learned what overhead was. I went to a private high school with a strict dress code, ties, belt, etc. So, I bought a bunch of ties and belts from a thrift store and ran a lucrative rental business out of my locker. Locker accessories such as carpets and magnets. Carpets? In a locker? Do you mean like floor mats? Or small rugs? I didn't know there were schools with walk-in lockers. Used to crush up warheads and mix them with sugar. Sold them by the straw with the ends melted. 50 cents a piece. I don't know if this counts, but me and my brother would take money to beat all the challenges in GoldenEye 007 for N64, so people got all the cheats. The invincibility challenge was the toughest. I used to sell Coke, the drink, because they didn't allow fizzy drinks to be brought in. Authorities have reported that a young student was identified selling Coke in a middle school. Hold on, I'm getting reports that it is, in fact, Coca-Cola and not the other thing. There goes that story. I have family in New York and would go to visit a couple of times a year back in high school. Every once in a while, we'd visit Chinatown in New York City, and I'd end up buying hundreds of dollars worth of fake watches, Rolex, Tag, Gucci, etc., return to school, and sell them for double than what I paid for them. Pokemon cards we would hide under playground equipment and trade them because the teachers would take them if they saw them. So we always set up deals in class and created a whole Pokemon card trading network. My school used the metallic ends of pencils as a currency. Bronze was rarest, so it was the most expensive. Green was most common, so it was the least. We traded for erasers or pencil cases or a spot up in the 4-square line. Eventually got banned, but we still operated with people acting as banks to keep the currency hidden and to keep transactions hidden. At my school, they took all the sweets out of the vending machines and replaced them with healthy snacks. In the local town, there was a sweet shop where you could buy a kilo of mixed sweets for £5. So every week I would go there and buy 1 pound of small paper bags and spend the Sunday night before school repackaging them all ready for the week ahead. Come Monday, I would go into the school and load up my bag up every day selling the bags for 50 pence. Cuban sandwiches straight out of a duffel bag before school. They were bomb, cheap, and way better than the lunch in the cafeteria. Oh my god, no, you guys have got to check out this movie called Chef. It has Jon Favreau and John Leguizamo in it, and among the incredible dishes shown in the movie, cubanos are part of it. It's a sandwich made with marinated pork, ham, cheese, and pickles, all in between pan cubano, a specific type of sandwich bread. It gets pressed on a plancha, and it looks so good. I know I talk about food way too much on this channel, but you all have to watch it or try it yourself. The only guy in the school whose family had proper TV channels used to tape wrestling events and rent them out. Apple laptops in middle school. Some had iTunes, some didn't, and the kids wanted it, so I apparently was the only one who knew how to transfer the installer with my USB. I put it on everyone's laptop for gifts, favors, etc. in return. Got caught by the sub that day. I told her it was my flash drive, I could do what I wanted with it. And that's how I got my second detention in my life. Gifts were typical middle schooler stuff. Yu-Gi-Oh cards, fruit snacks, best food trades during lunch, gaining popularity, and hanging out with the cool people. Obviously they were taking advantage of me, but I didn't mind. When I was in the 6th grade, a teacher sold candy in between classes at marked up rates. A student decided to undercut her. That put an end to all candy sales. These little game coupons that our teacher gave out for winning class quiz games. Right when people were starting to get scanners and printers in their own homes, some kid made copies of his coupons and sold or traded them to other students. Since I have some people asking what the coupons could be traded for, it was usually a piece of candy or a pencil with a fun print or something similar. I think the kids ended up getting caught like 2 weeks into the scheme. Edit: a lot of people are comparing this to Diary of a Wimpy Kid, which I've heard of but never read before. I think kids are just clever and do this kind of thing on their own because a lot of people in the replies had similar things happen in their own schools as well. I don't know if this is where the kid got his idea or not, but this may have been before those books came out. Silly bands. I remember a kid made like $50 in one day. You know, I actually looked this up because I remember silly bands when I used to go to school, and they ended up being banned in classrooms for being too distracting, which, you know, schools will ban anything if they deem it, quote, distracting. But there have been incidents where children have cut off circulation by extending several silly bands up their arms, in some cases causing serious injuries. You're telling me that my T-Rex shaped silly band would have cut my circulation off? I had the principal's secretary's handwriting down and used to sell hall passes for $1 each. Made a killing. I don't really know how much I made, but it was in the realm of $5 a day. Sometimes I went dry because you needed the actual pass paper, but I finally figured out how to get into the supply closet, slide the student ID by the latch bolt. I only took a few pads at a time so they wouldn't get suspicious. Edit: I could also forge my mother's signature. Did it so well that when I brought in a note from her that she scribbled on the dash, they called her to confirm. This kid committed forgery. What's not a crime is subscribing to Am I the Genius? Or if you like these videos, you might like Am I the Jerk, linked in the description below. Thanks for watching! MP3s and CDRs were just becoming available. A guy I knew made a killing on mixed CDs. Every week he circulated forms to fill out, where you selected the songs you wanted on the CD. The newest hits were on the top and changed weekly. The rest of his library filled the rest of the form, and there was a space for requests. He'd deliver your disc the following week. He seriously made bank for a couple years until everybody started getting their songs from LimeWire or whatever. I don't know what he's doing now, 20 years later, but I don't doubt he's successful. Just as a bit of an aside, since a few responses have mentioned LimeWire, when this guy started doing it in high school, the only real avenues for music sharing were Usenet groups and IRC. Nintendo games. Some kids sold them off for like 10 or 15 bucks a pop. I don't know where he got them from, but he said he just told his dad what he wanted and his dad would get it for him. He'd ask for the same ones over and over and it didn't matter. He'd end up with 5 copies and he'd just sell 4 of them. Either the kid was the most spoiled brat in history, or his dad was straight up stealing them anyhow. Anyways, I could never get any. I had a Sega, but I remember that kid making a killing in grade 3. Slap bracelets. Small southern town with just a Walmart and 1 or 2 small clothing stores that carried them. Anyone who went out of town to do clothes shopping or because their parents worked there would come back with bracelets we couldn't get here, so a little black market popped up. This girl Danielle convinced my best friend and I, along with some other people, that she could forever change the taste of saliva in our mouth, so that our saliva would taste like watermelon, cotton candy, bubblegum, etc. forever. She made us wait a couple days so we could really think about what flavor we wanted in our mouth forever. For example, she would tell us, "Are you sure you always want everything you eat to have a hint of watermelon?" Anyways, after a couple days and we picked a flavor, she charged us money. I can't remember how much, but it was probably 50 cents or something. She made us chew on all this crazy stuff like paper clips, erasers, and other things. Obviously, our saliva never changed flavor, and she stopped this. But I worked at Starbucks a couple years ago in my hometown, and she came in and didn't even recognize me. and all I could think about was how that girl had me chewing on paper clips. I would buy 6 packs of soda for $1.79 and resell the 6 sodas for a total of $3. Not labeled for individual sale? Come on, bro. 2 years ago, I was a sophomore in high school, and freshmen weren't allowed to go off campus, but everyone else was. So I'd take orders, go to the local fast food shops, and get the goods. I'd up the price by about $2 and ended up making about $200 a month. The swim team or something were selling these fundraiser lollipops, and they were insanely popular. I found the website on the wrapper and discovered I could buy my own way cheaper. I could also buy only the popular flavors. So I had only the best flavors, and I could undercut the actual fundraisers by a quarter, still making over 100% profit. I quickly became a top seller and made bank until the copycats started popping up. Banana chips were 25 cents in the vending machine in middle school. I always went to school early, so I always ended up buying all of them and selling them for 50 cents a bag. My school was an extremely conservative Christian boarding school. Things that were forbidden were, by no means a complete list, jeans for girls, shorts for everyone, candy, any sort of food in the dorms, cell phones, any form of gaming system, TV or movies, playing non-Christian songs on musical instruments, clothes made by popular brands, A&F and Hollister, etc. Naturally, there were a few students who started selling food, candy, and A&F/Hollister clothes. Why people bought these from them, I don't know, but they made huge amounts of money. A lot of the kids at that school were rich doctors' kids, so there was plenty of money to go around. One guy sold a box of Altoids for $15. TLDR, my high school was so strict that the black market was people paying ridiculous amounts of money for food and snacks. I lived in an area with a lot of retiree-age people, a lot of which ended up raising their grandchildren. It really isn't a good area. Being older and from a rural area, they still don't trust online sites like eBay or Amazon, so I started ordering people things from those sites for actual money and added a charge for me to be making money off of it. It eventually got shut down because I got someone a USB in the shape of a pistol. It was the size of a USB and clearly a USB, but it didn't matter. The principal actually got the police involved to try to get me in real trouble. Some kids made a habit of stealing chalk when the teachers weren't looking. After a while, they started selling it, charging more for longer and fresher sticks. It ended with someone eventually snitched on a buyer, which started a cascade of counter-snitching. A cascade of counter-snitching. That is such a beautiful sentence. Many pockets were emptied, some with chalk, but most of the dealers had hidden their chalk and got away with it. I was a Pokemon card smuggler. In 6th grade, my friend's dad overheard my friend and I talking about how much our Pokemon cards were worth. He was shocked to learn some were $10 to $20 a piece. He made the comment, "Shame they won't be worth that much when you go to sell them." That comment stuck with me, and a few days later, I started selling my cards at school. I made a list of everything I had with prices next to them. I passed the list around during class, and kids would meet up with me between classes to buy what they wanted. I was making crazy amounts of money for a middle schooler, and before long, parents were complaining that their kids were skipping lunch because they were spending their lunch money on Pokemon cards. So, the school banned them. But I still had a good bit of inventory to move. I did all kinds of things to avoid getting caught. I hid cards in boxes of crayons, I put a few sheets of sleeves in the middle of a binder full of legit notes. I even hollowed out an old textbook to hide all my cards. Despite getting searched 3 to 5 times over the next few weeks, my cards were never found, and I was able to sell all of them before Christmas break. I ended up making close to $800 and was able to buy my entire immediate and extended family Christmas gifts with my own money for the first time. Once all the other kids learned how much money I had made, they were blown away, and suddenly everyone was selling their cards. Problem was, no one was buying them anymore. TLDR, I started a one-kid Pokemon card black market, smuggling them into school, and got out of the game right before the bubble burst. Pencils for pencil fighting. The way it worked is, one person would hold their pencil out, grabbing both ends, and then the other person would see if they could break the pencil with theirs by holding one end and then pulling the other end back, snapping it down on the other pencil. We made a website that started as us doing stupid prank phone calls and jerkwad stunts. It turned into a homework sharing and answers to tests and quizzes that people would steal later. Luckily, I wasn't involved by that time, but my friends weren't involved in graduation. Marbles were big at my primary school. Real big. It got to the stage where they were only allowed for 3 months a year, as we would no longer discuss anything but the game we had or the make we wanted to pay for. That was marble season. Now you could buy a big bag of cat's eyes from the supermarket, but they wouldn't get you far. To play the high-stakes games, you needed a specked egg, a glitter bomb, a tidal wave, or something exotic, but those suckers were pricey. Us poor kids couldn't afford those things, so we secretly gambled our marbles through the year. So when marble season opened, we had amassed enough marbles to really be ahead of the game. Being caught with marbles outside of marble season was bad, real bad. One kid got 5 strokes of the cane. This being so, it was a big risk to hide in the shadows of the trees and sling those little glass balls about. Not only did it hone your skills for the season start, but you got good at taking the shot and then acting nonchalant. Marbles were currency. You could trade lunches with them or buy time on playground equipment. There was a good reason they banned marbles at my school. We turned it into some sort of mafia crap. My mom won a year's supply of double-stuffed Oreos. I sold them in Ziploc bags while in 4th grade to everyone I could, even teachers. My mom thought my friends were eating them all. Me and my best friends sold packs of gum in middle school. We'd make around $30 a day, and the teachers were going crazy trying to find where all the gum was coming from. As model students, they never suspected us. I'm kinda glad that I'm not the only one who knew high schoolers obsessed with gum. Every day, almost every period, I would hear people asking people for gum. They'd even ask me, nerdy kid who no one really talked to, if I had gum. That's when you knew they were desperate. Live fish. Some Asian kid would walk around school with a few live pet fish in his school bag and sell them. Pop rocks in the late 70s. Kid drove 40 miles from Alabama to Catholic school in Georgia and got him an AL and doubled the price in GA. Sister Charles broke up the ring before we could find out if drinking Coke and eating Pop Rocks blew up your stomach. Pink eye, $5. In middle school, you could come to school with pink eye and make a lot of money off of kids who wanted to miss a test. Kid would just stick his finger in his own eye and then in yours. The f***? No! I hate that. These Hispanic kids in my school brought a bunch of Mexican snacks to class and sold them for cheap. Those mango lollipops with the chili powder on them, or whatever it is, were the bomb. Actually, I happen to have a hustle. My friend lived in New Orleans. She moved away from my state and came up to visit. It was just Mardi Gras, and she had a whole trunk full of beads. She gave me an entire bucket of them because they were literally in over their heads. I marketed them at school as authentic beads from the real Mardi Gras, and kids were paying 50 cents for one of them. I should have majored in business instead of becoming an art student. During elementary school in the 80s, many candies weren't individually wrapped for resale in stores. Think Warheads, etc. I bought bulk packs of candy, didn't matter what kind, although atomic fireballs were my cash cow. I individually packed them, or maybe a couple to a pack depending on the candy. I used those tiny Ziplocs you see people use for drugs. Being around adults a little devoid of scruples, I was able to get those in bulk from a local head shop called High on the Hill. It was a surreal time looking back. I was the only supplier for a year solid in 4th grade. I made so much bank for a 10-year-old, it was insane. I would make $100 a week just off of atomic fireballs. The bulk jugs were about $5 or $6 each wholesale, and at a quarter each, it worked out to about $60 a jug profit if I recall. Luckily, school came easy to me because it was a full-time job keeping stock, packaging product, counting piles of change, budgeting, keeping a bank register, mom got a separate account that I used for my money, dodging the man, etc. It was turbulent as I never really had a group of friends as a kid, but in the 4th grade, I was the freaking man. Going from having no real, quote, good friends, and having my time divided by either being picked on or ignored, to becoming the belle of the ball was surreal. Even at that time, I was able to realize what was going on. Their smiles were all fake. Their interest was not in me, but rather what was in my bag any given day. Girls were not saying hello because they were being polite, or even the least bit interested in talking to me. They were just waiting their turn for their fix. That denim bag got more attention than I ever dreamed of. I was just along for the ride. I had laid the groundwork and provided the blueprint. When the 5th grade started, there was competition, but they were weak. They would always sell out or only buy enough to make a few bucks here and there, largely selling lollipops or prepackaged stuff, Hershey's Kisses, Bit of Honey or Tootsie Rolls, whatever they could grab at the store before school. It was amateur hour. They had made a mockery of something I took seriously, as seriously as a 10 to 11-year-old can take something. I closed up shop pretty quickly after the school year began. The fast life and fast money was over. The excitement wasn't there, the smiles weren't as big. Kids came to me as a last resort. They bought the popular kids completely out before looking my way. It was like flipping a switch. My first day without the bag, I had a few kids ask if I was holding, but once word got around that I was out of the game, everything went back to normal. No friends, no conversation, no one to sit with at lunch or on the bus. No one interested, fake or otherwise. It was the first time I had ever really witnessed the dynamic of being disingenuine. I had always been authentic, and after it was all over, I was happy to stay that way. I've never really recounted this time into words. As it turns out, I learned a lot of life lessons in the 4th grade. TLDR, I peaked in the 4th grade. Redditors who have won a lifetime supply contest. How did you win? And how's it going? In college, I frequented a specific Jack-in-the-Box that was walking distance from campus. I'd occasionally talk with the manager, who was a pretty cool guy and one of only a few people I knew who were into the World Cup. One day he says, "You want a lifetime supply of milkshakes?" I thought he was joking, so I was like, "Sure." And he handed me a huge stack of free milkshake coupons. Not so much a contest, but I guess I won the prize for friendliness. Once won a year's supply of the Tropicana juice drink. Was awesome, but you could only buy 4 cartons a month with dated vouchers, so it never really felt as magical as I was hoping. 9-year-old me wanted like a dedicated Tropicana faucet in the kitchen. When I was a kid, there was a phone-in competition to rename a popular children's cereal. It cost money to vote as it was a premium number, but my mother let my younger brother vote for fun. What we didn't know at the time was by voting, you'd be entered to win a lifetime supply of this cereal, and my brother won. So they called up, and our mother told them we didn't want it. My mother ruined our childhood by telling Kellogg's we didn't want their lifetime supply of cereal. I could be eating that right now. 16 years later, I could still be enjoying that cereal. This was in the 90s. My granddad won a lifetime supply of Reader's Digest. He was the only doctor in a small village in India, population under 1,000. He started stacking them up in his clinic, and the village kids would randomly browse through them. As long as there wasn't a rush or they weren't being loud, my granddad would let them sit there for as long as they wanted. I spent my summer vacations in the village with my grandparents. My parents had moved to a nearby city long before I was born, and so it happened that every summer, I'd come to the village to find my rural friends speak better English than anyone else in the village, and in some cases better than my English school-educated city friends, and sharing jokes from the "life's like that" and "laughter is the best medicine" sections. Every time I think back on it, I feel happy and proud of my granddad. When I was in college, a guy in my fraternity was featured in a Nike running commercial. He was paid a fixed amount, and they would randomly send him shoes throughout the 2 years I knew him. After he graduated, shoes still showed up at the house every quarter until I graduated. The funny part of the story is that he was on the university cross-country team, D1, and when he signed the paperwork, it voided his scholarship. The coach calls him in his office and berates him for a half hour on how he, quote, screwed up his scholarship. His response was priceless. I have 4 more semesters and Nike paid me enough to cover in-state tuition for that time. Also, I hate running, but I'm good enough to have gotten a scholarship. Now, I have school paid for and will never run again. Good luck to you all, though. Won a lifetime supply of knives. I guessed correctly how many sheets of paper the knife could stab through. After I broke the first 2, I was told my third was my last one. Apparently, the knives were supposed to last a lifetime. I went to school with a kid whose mom won a lifetime supply of aluminum foil. They wrap everything in foil. His whole lunch every day was wrapped in foil, sandwich, fruit, etc. And then they make one of those baking pouches, and that's his lunch bag. When we had dessert potluck, his cookies came wrapped in foil. I asked him about it, and he said that they even wrap all their Christmas presents in it, and they still get too many boxes of it. They give it away to friends and family. This is something I had no idea could be a problem until I read about it. When Naked brand juice smoothies first came out in San Francisco, I happened to be a homeless vagabond. I sat there by the trolleys with a sign, Homeless, hungry, anything helps. A nice lady was handing out free coupons to try out this new juice at Whole Foods. She saw my plight and was probably sick of handing out coupons, so she dumped hundreds of them in my hat. I lived off of naked fruit juice smoothies. Every day I would walk into Whole Foods and redeem one of my coupons. I had a seemingly endless supply, and the company hadn't put much information on them, so they didn't expire. Someone grifted my bag though a few months later, but I was so amped up on B vitamins and antioxidants that I chased him down. He said sorry and shared a huge package of imitation crab with me. I made a new friend and bought him some naked juice with my coupon. I ended up losing the rest of my coupons by being an idiot, but that's when I sort of had a lifetime supply of something. My friend and I were in a competition at an arena football game to win, quote, free pizza and beer for a year. The first person to kick a field goal from 15 to 20 yards away would win. Apparently, their definition of a year's worth of pizza and beer is 12 24-packs of beer and a large Rocky Rococo's pizza per month for 12 months. We had to pick up all 12 cases of the beer from a distributor at one time, so we had a party. Obligatory not me, but a friend. A friend of mine won a lifetime supply of pizza from Pizza Hut. They calculated his age, the average pizzas a person consumes per year, did some mathematical calculation, and FedExed him a check for $37,000. In my book, he won. Want to win a lifetime supply of free YouTube content? Subscribe to Am I the Genius or Am I the Jerk, linked in the description below. Thanks for watching! Not me, but this happened back to a good friend in 2010. He was wasted waiting in line for Late Night with Jimmy Fallon. Got asked if he wanted to do a skit involving punching balloons on air. So he gets on air and they dress him and two other people up in karate uniforms. The two other people go and kind of try to get some balloons, but you can tell they were shy. My buddy gets up there completely drunk, and Jimmy asks him his name. He tells them his name is Sho'nuff, the Shogun of Little Town in Northeast to protect his privacy. Questlove gets up from behind the drum kit and gives Sho'nuff a hug. My friend proceeds to ninja kick all the balloons, and Jimmy tells him he just won a lifetime supply of soft taco kits. The Roots play a theme song, Who's the Master? Sho'nuff! I lived with him at the time, and we seriously had 2 pallets of taco kits dropped off at our house. We had them in the cabinets, living room entertainment center, gave them away. But, 1,000 boxes of taco kits is hard to give away. We donated about 200 when we realized we wouldn't use them all. Flash forward 2 more years, 2012, and he once again got back on air to tell a story of how he woke up drunk in a casino elevator. Sure enough, The Roots again play his theme song. I cannot find a YouTube link, and the link we put up was taken down for copyright and cannot find it on Hulu. TLDR, friend got 1,000 taco kits, quote, lifetime, from the Jimmy Fallon show, and The Roots made a theme song for him. He's now been on Jimmy Fallon 4 times since. My wife won a lifetime supply of pet food for a cat. They didn't even bother sending product. They just tacked another few $1,000s onto the $10,000 cash prize. That was a nice little windfall. The only weird thing was that it was paid as a stack of maxed out Visa gift cards. You can't really pay things like mortgages and credit card bills with what amounts to a credit card, so we ended up using the gift cards for things like groceries. It's pretty amazing how far your paycheck goes when your bill for food and incidentals is effectively zero. Didn't win, but received a lifetime pass for a music festival. So far, there have only been 2 years of festival, but they just confirmed the 3rd. 2 of the best weekends of my life. Would recommend. Edit, received it by attending the festival announcement party. Everyone got an envelope upon entry, which clearly had passes in them, but said not to open. At the end of the night, if you still had a sealed envelope, they gave you a, quote, lifetime pass. I think about 20 out of 200 people maybe. When I was little, I won a lifetime supply of apples by correctly guessing how many were in a barrel. There were 110 and I guessed 109. The prize was 110 apples at a time each month. It was insane. After the first delivery, my parents begged them to stop. It's impossible for a family of 3 to go through 110 apples before they rot, and our neighbors stopped answering the door when they saw my parents standing there with bags of apples. Grandpa negotiated free cell service for life for him and his wife when the cell company wanted to put up a tower on his farm. After a few years, they started getting charged because the tower was bought by another company and they wouldn't respect the deal. Not sure if this counts, but I got free cable from Cox Communication because their equipment at the drop almost burned my house down. They gave me every channel and internet. Well, some time passed, and they sold to Suddenlink, and I thought nothing of it. Well, I got a bill 2 months later for $600, and I was like, what? Suddenlink refused to honor our agreement with Cox, and to this day, I refuse to pay that bill, and our internet is under my new wife's name. Not a lifetime supply, but my grandpa enters every contest imaginable, and once won free tampons for a year. My sisters and I got to take them because my grandpa doesn't have a uterus. The things he had to post on Facebook to get entries were hilarious. All things about being a strong, independent woman. That man has no shame if it means he can win even something completely useless to him. Edit. For those who are curious about other things he's won, I'll see if I can send this to the editors. Here is a picture of him next to his own life-sized bobblehead of himself for your viewing pleasure. My mother won a lifetime supply of Pez on Let's Make a Deal. It was a few cases of dispensers and candy. I'm really into competitions, and although I've never won a lifetime supply of anything, I've won a year's worth of cheese. Twice. The first time was 12 vouchers, but for the second one, they actually sent me 2 massive screw-off cheese wheels. They were like 25 pounds each. I cut them up and filled my fridge and freezer, and the fridge and freezers of my friends, with cheese. It actually froze and defrosted really well. I'll be eating that cheese for ages. A friend of mine won Lifetime Sonic on a radio contest. Every month, he gets a Sonic gift card for $200, and he takes everyone up there for a free meal and spends the rest buying random people's meals. My friend won free chicken from Raising Cane's for life. In order to claim his chicken, he had to present the card given to him. After a few months of free chicken, his wallet was stolen, putting an end to his free chicken. Somebody was very happy when they saw that card in his wallet. It wasn't a lifetime supply, but I won free pizza for a year from this bomb place, Pizza Rev. I only got 1 pizza a week, but most of the time I'd go with friends, family, or dates, and they'd just give me the entire party's pizzas for free. So really most weeks, I got 2 to 4 free pizzas, and I never missed a week. They knew me by name there, and all new employees would greet me with, "Hey, it's Free Pizza Guy!" I miss that free pizza. Won a lifetime supply of Chuck Taylor Converse. Basically, they sent me 12 vouchers for a free pair of Converse. You could pick high or low top and the color. I think I still have one of the pairs, and the rest I gave to friends and family. Our elderly neighbors won a lifetime supply of Snickers. We have a very large family, parents plus 10 kids, and the summer I was 7, my father was injured at work. While waiting on workers' comp to be paid, our electric, water, and gas were all shut off. Our neighbors ran a hose to our backyard for water, an extension cord for a microwave, and gave us dozens of cases of Snickers. We lived the entire summer on candy bars and ramen. I can't stand the stuff now. Okay, but mad props to the neighbors though, they are the sweetest people. I have a friend that did an Arby's commercial years ago. They gave him an Arby's card that could be used for up to $20 or $25 a day. It's like a gift card that gets topped off daily. Only bad thing is, he can't save the credit to make a big purchase. It has a cap of $25. Not so much one, but my mother-in-law has free broadband for life. Company needed to run a line through her garden. Mother-in-law says sure, but I want free internet forever. Hasn't paid a cent in 2 years, and the disruption to the back garden was minimal and easily fixed. I won a year's worth of burgers from Jack in the Box in college. They gave us 156 cards that would literally work for any burger or sandwich on their menu. I gained about 15 pounds, and then I started to use them as trading tools to get my stoner friends to do stuff. It started with, if you run down to 7-Eleven and get me a Gatorade, I'll give you 1 burger card, and then turned more into things like, you drink that bong water, I'll give you 3 burger cards. It was glorious. The cards definitely didn't last me a year. Not myself, but my aunt won a lifetime supply of donuts from Krispy Kreme. In reality, they just gave her a crap ton of vouchers for a free dozen of donut boxes. I don't remember how many, but I know she got a box a week for at least a couple years last I checked. She won it by being first in line at a new store opening. Why she went, I don't know, since she wasn't like the donut queen or something. Won a lifetime supply of free coffee from a brew shop in town. I guessed correctly how many beans were in a tall plastic cylinder. Shop closed 5 months later. In 2009, I entered the mychipotle.com contest with a music video and came in second place. Second place prize was $5,000 and a party for 50 of our friends at Chipotle. Everyone ate for free. Winning that was awesome, but honestly, the best part was that after the contest was over, Chipotle asked me how many people were involved in the making of the music video we made, and then sent a deck of playing cards for each person. The catch? Each card in the deck of cards had written on it one free burrito. Yeah, including jokers. 56 free Chipotle burritos. Since I was the first person to find out and receive these decks of cards, I kept it a secret. I called each person individually and said I had a gift for them. Seeing them open the deck of cards, figure out what it was, then react to it was the best part of this whole thing. Each of them volunteered their time to help make the video with no promise of winning or any reward. So, all in all, no lifetime winnings, but to a bunch of teenagers, it certainly felt like a lifetime of burritos. Didn't win it, but once I was driving down this crappy dirt road and found a pile of thousands and thousands of AA batteries. No idea how they got there, but they were pretty fresh, no corrosion. So I took a 5-gallon bucket, filled it up, and went on my way. 4 years later, I'm about 3 gallons in, and they still power my Xbox controllers. I guess I should add this interesting detail. Strangely, they were Kodak brand. Like they were supposed to be in disposable cameras or something. They didn't ever last very long, maybe half as long as Duracell/Energizer, but they were free. I won a year's worth of ice cream. The deal is for 1 pint a month. Here's the kicker. I live on the other side of the country from the ice cream shop. My parents love it though. I've heard of actors, comedians, and celebs doing Taco Bell commercials. They get a lifetime supply of Taco Bell. They send them special Taco Bell currency after they run out, usually enough for months' worth of Taco Bell. The Sky Dome held a naming contest back in 1987, 2 years before it opened in downtown Toronto. The contest winner, picked at random from the many Sky Dome entries, a play on the stadium's retractable roof, received a lifetime supply of tickets for any event at the Dome. The stadium has changed ownership multiple times, and even the name has changed. It's now the Rogers Center, but the prize is still being honored. I won a lifetime supply of coffee beans for having guessed how many beans were in the tall glass jar during a competition. They arrive faster than I can use them, but the beans are high quality and make fun gifts for friends who like to grind and brew. My aunt won a lifetime supply of rice-a-roni from The Price is Right. She used to get them faster than she can use them, but now, understandably, she's sick of it, so she just stockpiles them in her rice-a-roni closet and donates hundreds of boxes of them at a time. Yes, she has a closet of rice-a-roni. The neighborhood kids love her. Probably too late to answer, but I get to mention my favorite aunt. She passed away 5 years ago now, and a lot of her competition wins were still active, so technically were for her lifetime. But really, she was just the luckiest person I knew, other than dying at 45 of breast cancer. In the time I was aware of her competition entering, she won a car, a free cruise for 2 people for life, a lifetime supply of ice cream, dog food, and some type of chicken nuggets. She won a Coke vending machine that will be refilled for free monthly for a year supply of spaghetti, a lifetime supply of dishwasher tablets, multiple holidays, a free landscaping of her yard, plus tons of stuff I can't remember. She absolutely loved entering competitions and actually had a dedicated room in her house for it. She was actually pretty good with tactics, tended to enter comps that required answering a question with more than 25 words, because she said these were least likely to have lots of entries. I miss her dearly. She was so full of life and loved talking about her hobby. As far as I know, the lifetime supply of things she won actually continued after her death. The ice cream and dishwater tablets, anyway. My high school geometry teacher's son won a contest where he was featured on boxes of Kraft mac and cheese and also got a lifetime supply of it. He had a picture of it / a cutout of the box on his desk, which was hysterical, and all I remember was him complaining about how sick he was of mac and cheese. I won a lifetime supply of Vegemite. It was only 2 jars. When I was a kid, I won 2 free Blockbuster rentals a month for life. It was awesome for a while. Now, it's not going so well. It wasn't a lifetime supply, but it was a year's supply of flavored milk. The company hosting the competition is based in Perth, Western Australia. The goal of the competition was to rename each flavor of milk to something uniquely Western Australian based on its color. In my case, I renamed the spearmint flavored milk, which is green, to Transperth, which is the public transport service in Western Australia. I came in second place for my submission and won a year's supply of flavored milk. Unfortunately, they couldn't figure out the logistics of sending me the milk, so in the end, they just transferred the equivalent amount of money into my bank account. I think it was about $1,200 or so. The money is long gone and well spent, and the irony is that I don't think I spent any of that money on milk. Go figure. I won a year's supply of Whataburger. Won it in a raffle at the opening of a new restaurant. What it really was 52 coupons for free Whataburgers. So basically, one burger per week for a year. Edit. Because of the popularity, I guess I will expand upon this story. I was 14, I think, when my family won this. I am now 17. Once a week, my family would go to Whataburger, and because of the terms of the coupon, one person would get the free #1 combo, and everyone else would get what they wanted, but we would pay. Honestly, they still made money off of us doing this, even though they gave away 52 free burgers. I am still glad though, because it gave us an excuse to eat Whataburger every single week, and who wouldn't want that?
What did your school waste money on that nobody liked? They made a huge screen with 4 plasma screens and put it in a very random place in a random building hall. All 4 just constantly said no signal and nothing else. Name tags. Shortly after Columbine and all those other shootings peaked in frequency, it was supposed to keep outsiders from getting in the school unnoticed and shooting everyone. But at the time, people doing the shootings were always students, so we joked that they were bulletproof. This does sound like one of those decisions that was made in response to something happening in current events, and maybe wasn't exactly thought through all the way. Some of my classmates won a bunch of money for our school. Our school was one of the lowest funded schools in the district. The district took the money and spent it on another school. Maybe that school needed it more or needed it for something really important, but yeah, either way, that doesn't seem fair on surface level. The large schoolyard at my school had a set of planters in the center. There were basically 4 triangles made of brick that pointed in at each other and created an X-shaped walkway between. The outside sides had a bench each attached. People would sit and chat to each other on the benches, teachers and students alike. There was very little litter or vandalism. The plants were kinda pretty insofar as any secondary schooler would care to notice. One year, a duck made her nest in one of the planters, and apart from a few "oh, hey, a duck nest" comments, it was left alone. Then, for some reason, the school decided to rip the planters out. Took them 2/3 of the school year to do it, and blocked off the X walkways so everyone had to crush by on the outside lanes between classes. Everyone was super curious as to what the planters would be replaced by. Turns out, nothing. They simply bricked over the holes left by the planters and left it as a huge empty space. We didn't even get new benches, so no one had anywhere to sit during break. People started to miss the plants since the lack of color left the whole area kinda bland. We also kept to the old X walkway since stepping over the former plants felt weirder. This seems like one of those times where it's just like, why? What was the issue? You spent a lot of time and money to just take something away that was nice? iPads for the kindergarten. They were intended to have educational apps on them that kids could play on at indoor recess. Believe it or not, most kindergartners would rather play on the swings or play with dolls than learn to write their name on an app. No one used them, no one liked them, and they all broke within 2 months. Yeah, that sounds like a waste of money if I ever heard one. I was on a boys' varsity soccer team in high school. The new head coach wanted to emphasize a more analytical approach, and as such had Booster Club buy a $10,000 goalpost camera. None of the team liked the idea anyway, especially since the girls' soccer team used their money for new jerseys and nicer balls, and they still made it farther in their playoffs than we did almost every year. As it turns out, the coach couldn't figure out how to put the camera together, and we never used it. Biggest waste of $10,000 I've ever seen. I'm sure there was a much cheaper option he probably could have gone for. Trash cans with the school logo on them and banners. They tried hyping us up about new trash cans on the morning show. At my school, they took away some of the tables in the cafeteria until we kept it cleaner. We just sat on the floor instead. When 65-inch TVs were like 4K a pop, they set about 8 of them around campus that just displayed the time. $4,000 clocks. Not to mention whatever they used as a video source to send to the display. This makes no sense to me that you would make an investment like this and then not make proper use of it. What is wrong with people? You can do so much more than just show the time. Be creative, come on. My high school purchased a vending machine that only contained Swerve. What is Swerve, you ask? Carbonated milk. Again, who's in charge of these ideas? A 3D printer that the teachers won't learn how to use, so now nobody's allowed to use it. My school got 4 of those, and the teacher responsible for them actually encouraged us to take the SolidWorks course to learn about 3D design. It was actually a lot of fun, and I still have some of the objects I created. Goes to show, a lot of the times it comes down to the person doing the teaching. They have to have some enthusiasm. A memorial tree was planted for a girl who was killed right before graduation by her family and friends. The school allowed it, and there was a beautiful Japanese maple tree there for like 10 years. Apparently they just cut it down and had no reason why. Everyone was pretty ticked off, especially the family. My son's current school sent out an email to parents announcing that they like to add voice projection to every class. He's in 1st grade and there are 20 kids in his class. Totally unnecessary. They had a demo session and it sounded horrible. My high school teacher got these midway through my junior year and they sucked. The range wasn't great and the receiver in one classroom would pick up the microphone in another, and the battery life was awful, so the teachers rarely used it. The best thing that they were used for was the one time that my teacher noticed a kid in the room across the hall was asleep in class. They were watching a video and the other teacher had stepped out of the room for a moment. They walked over to the door so that the other room's receiver would pick up his mic and said, "Wake up!" and then closed his door. This really does sound like a waste of money unless you specifically have a kid who has a hearing disability or something. And in that case, normally they have something that is individual to them that connects to their hearing aid and the teacher has a microphone so that they can hear them better. Not something that needs to be projected to the whole class. When I was still a student, my school spent almost $200,000 to paint the road outside our school. You read that right. Almost $200,000 of our precious tuition dollars to paint the roads outside blue and yellow. To pour salt on this painful wound, the paint job didn't even make it through winter. Just to reiterate, $200,000 for 3 months of painted road. I think I'm still angry about it. Who would hear that cost and decide, yeah, that sounds like a good investment? My high school wasted a ton of money buying 2 golf carts. Their reasoning was it allowed staff to get to any dangerous scenes faster. Except we never had any accidents and they were mostly used for joyrides by the hall monitors. You know what? This one I can kinda get behind. It's not some $200,000 expense and they got used and you had a little fun along the way. One of the schools in our district paid an astronomical fee to an artist to create artwork for the hall of the school. Paid for the dude's room and board for like a year, and he produced a large polished piece of wood. No, literally, that's it. It was supposed to be shaped like a heart, but looks more like a butt, and is now known as the Bart. I'm sorry, but sometimes I do think that modern art is just ridiculous and a ripoff. My school just spent tens of millions of dollars on a remodel that includes a new commons and front office area, which were not needed, but no new classrooms, which were desperately needed. The old commons was warm, inviting, bright, and beautiful. It wasn't old. The new commons is dark, cold, sterile, and uninviting. The exterior was changed too. The entire front of the school used to be attractive. Now it looks like a prison. I think maybe the architect presented the design as a joke, but our principal liked it, so the architect just rolled with it. It never fails that when a school gets some money, they spend it on the staff and not the students. They cut out welding, machine shop, wood shop, and graphic design to buy a $1 million scoreboard for football. Honestly, there's way too much value put onto sports. Everything that was listed sounds way more valuable to learn than to be able to look at a scoreboard. Our mascot was a rocket, and a certain percentage of school construction money had to be spent on art. They spent $90,000 commissioning a giant rocket sculpture for the main field entrance. When it was unveiled, the artist had made one tiny change to the design. Instead of a pointy rocket tip, he'd gone with a rounded, mushroom tip. I mean, we thought it was hilarious, especially when they cut off the tip as their solution to the problem. But nobody liked it. I'm sorry. Did they circumcise the rocket? My school invested in 8-year-old Chromebooks that die in like 30 minutes. Again, not willing to invest in what the students actually need, and just going for the cheapest, crappiest thing they can find. I'm a teacher. My first year, the school leader bought a ping pong table for the lounge in an attempt to make the school more fun and relaxing. It simply became a surface to put copies on. You know what? This one sounds like it's more of a people around you situation. You guys could be having fun with it, but you're choosing not to. That's on you, not them. Besides, tables themselves can get pretty expensive. At least this one you can play with if you want. My son's elementary school PTO had an excess of funds. They decided to put it on a buddy bench. A buddy bench is a bench where you can sit on if you want a buddy. In theory, it sounded like a decent idea, except that it was placed in the hallway near the office and none of the kids wanted to be identified as someone who didn't have a friend. Nobody ever sits on it. I agree that the theory of the buddy bench is nice, but in practicality, it's probably not going to get used. This wasn't common knowledge, so I was the only one really ticked off by it, but I worked for Cisco Foods as a baker at a university, and the upper echelons of the administration had hired their own personal pastry chef to make these extravagant desserts for their meetings. This pastry chef was legit. She made absolutely amazing desserts of a wide variety every day, loaded them onto the cart, and with her baker's outfit and hat on would wheel it up to their daily administration meetings. Her salary was paid for by the students of the school, so that the administrators could dine on first-class pastries and desserts made from scratch each day. She was really good at her job and actually helped me improve in the bakery. But I was so mad that her job even existed simply to provide pastries to people who just sat around and decided how the school's money was spent. I obviously didn't make a stink about it to anyone because she was my friend, and I would never dream of putting her employment at risk. But I couldn't help feeling like her entire career was to make fat cats fatter, and it just boiled my blood. Okay, this is the first story that has genuinely ticked me off in how money is being spent. Just random TVs in the hallway that showed slideshows and crap. Tens of thousands of dollars when we could have just put up bulletin boards. My school had loads of TVs that I don't recall ever seeing turned on. Seems like there might be a trend in the TV area here. They installed cameras in nearly every inch of the school, not for student safety, but because the school board didn't trust the kids. My school was miles behind other high schools. Old textbooks and sometimes not enough textbooks. Computers were junk, no in-school programs. They spent every ounce of money on cameras and putting the rest in the school board's pockets. I really feel like these places need to be more strongly audited for stuff like this. My high school spent a bunch of money on this system to play popular songs for the last minute of passing time between classes. So we'd hear popular music and as a convenient way to know to get to your next class. Then they started playing Friday by Rebecca Black every Friday. Once. Then it was the only song on Fridays. Then it was the only song. Every day, 5 times a day. Thank God that was my senior year. No idea if they still do it. My God, I hope not. I'm sure the kids would be rioting. My school's mascot was a knight, and it was rumored that the school had the choice of installing a pool at the high school or to commission a large 25-foot-long metal sculpture of a knight on a horse, and to hang it from the ceiling in the back hallway. They opted for the horse. My guess on this one is they didn't want the long-term maintenance cost of the pool. They bought flags of all the states and put them around this caged-in area full of gravel. They caged in the gravel to stop students from walking across the gravel. They also bought flags in the school's color to line the fence around campus. Only thing is, we were in an area which can get very windy with zero windshield, so those flags took a beating. By mid-year, they were an ugly frayed mess. My school spent $30,000 from 2 years of fundraising on an LED billboard about 10 feet off of a major road. It was so bright that it caused several accidents at night and had to be shut down about 8 months later because it was deemed a safety hazard. I hung out with several of the guys on the programming team and they figured out how to upload memes onto it. They couldn't figure out who did it, so no one got in trouble. In 2011, my college spent $32,000 to have Snooki come in as an inspirational speaker in some misguided attempt to connect with freshmen. Around the same time, there was a growing student-led movement to make the school more affordable. The student board revolted. People confronted her during her speech. It was a glorious mess. I think anyone who finds Snooki to be inspirational doesn't need to be encouraged. I went to a Catholic high school. Very few of the students were actually Catholic and went there because the local public school district was terrible. We won some contest or grant and the school said they would allow the students to pick what the money was spent on. The options were new flooring for the gym, renovate the courtyard next to the chapel into a prayer garden, or renovating the courtyard next to the cafeteria into an outdoor eating space. Most people voted for new gym floors, and some people voted for the outdoor eating space. I don't know of anyone who voted for the prayer garden. Guess what won? The prayer garden. People, even teachers, were furious, as the voting was clearly rigged to give us the appearance of a choice. If they really wanted a prayer garden, they should have just done the work without putting it to a vote. The funny thing about the prayer garden is that they actually made it nice and put in benches and plants and whatnot, but it was always locked and never used. Administration would often say during tours, "Oh, look at our lovely prayer garden for students. They voted for it." No, we didn't. Wait, the church used the money on themselves? No. i7 workstation laptops with Quadro GPUs, easily $2,500 each, for an elementary school, kindergarten through grade 6. Those machines were designed for CAD work and media production, but were instead solely used for web browsing and Microsoft Word. I don't have any idea why they bought them. Okay, so earlier we were talking about 8-year-old Chromebooks. This school has decided to go to the complete opposite end of the spectrum. These are laptops that should be available to university students who are studying like 3D rendering and things like that. This really goes to show that the people who decide where the money goes don't have any idea what they're doing. Laminated ID cards that everyone had to wear around their necks on some dorky lanyard. No one did it, so they made it punishable by detention. After that, half the students still didn't do it, and the detention hall became so overwhelmed that they began to make backlogs. After a few weeks, not wearing it gave you a detention 2 months from then. Eventually, detention became so backlogged that students started doing more severe transgressions because they would have graduated before they could actually be forced to go to detention. After about a month of this, no one had to wear their ID cards at all anymore. They said it was for security purposes so no one could sneak into the school. The thing is, you could literally put anything in the lanyard and no one would check if it was your actual student ID card. I had a blank index card in mine and no one ever said anything to me. If someone actually wanted to sneak into the school, all they would need is a lanyard and no one would ever check if it's actually authentic or not. Like, what's the point? You're gonna sit there and enforce detention that aggressively because you need to flex your power over the students, but you're not gonna enforce the actual safety aspect that you're trying to argue that it's there for in the first place? Guys, this thread's really getting to me. Our school paid to cover a huge lot with cement just to have a ceremony on it announcing a new building. Then they tore it up 2 months later to start construction. My school fees went towards having nice cement for press pictures. What a joke. My school wasted so much money on plastic ID cards that you were supposed to scan into every room to assure you were there, and the IDs were also keys to get into the buildings. If you didn't have your card, you couldn't get in, and also got in-school suspension. It wasn't a bad system because you could easily take a photo of your ID to scan into rooms, but you'd have to bum a buddy to get into a building. But once there were internet problems, the whole system would shut down, and living in a rural wheat town, you could expect wind and rain and tornadoes and all of that fun stuff. My college spent $2,000 on a conference table. It made national headlines. This just reminds me of that scene from Community. When I went to college, the local NFL team paid for the school to go from a grass field to artificial turf. The school never said it was only half paid for by the team. My siblings had a whole year without paper, printers, no raises for staffs, cutting school programs, and they slashed the art budget. The football team still got new uniforms that year though. How are you going to put so much value on your football team? Come on, give the rest of the students what they need. My town got a brand new middle school, and somehow they spent $40,000 on a giant metal palm tree that they called the Learning Tree. One of the chair people essentially commissioned it from a relative. So many of us were ticked off. It didn't even have lights, and there was no way to clean it, so it just sat there like the giant waste of money it was collecting dust. Well, we liked it at first, not so much after. I followed a product development study and we got a fancy industry-grade laser cutter in our workplace. Then, after a couple of people were able to use it, the teacher decided it needed cleaning. She proceeded to use a toothpick to shove it into the nozzle where the laser comes out, damaging the mirror inside the machine. We had this thing for less than a week. 2 years later, I graduated, and as far as I know, that thing is still broken. Those lasers are incredibly expensive and powerful. What do you think was stuck in there that you could get out with a toothpick that the laser couldn't get out itself? When I started secondary school, we had a canteen with proper home-style food being served. Cooked fresh, real meat and vegetables, and good portion sizes. All the students loved it, and it was well used. The school decided to replace this with a fast food-style setup with processed burgers and fries to try to appeal to the kids, and up the prices too. Within a month, nobody visited the canteen anymore. Practically every kid in the school started bringing food from home. It took 3 months till they changed everything back again. Massive expense for absolutely no reason. It was already very successful as it was. Why mess with a good thing? You just wanted to get cheaper food in there and charge more, didn't you?
Teachers, what is the trashiest thing you've seen a parent do? I work at a school where over 80% of our population lives under the poverty line. I keep a cabinet full of hygiene products for kids to take. Deodorant, lotion, chapstick, hair gel, feminine hygiene products, shampoo, conditioner, those kinds of things in travel sizes. Being a teen is hard enough without having to cope with hygiene problems due to a lack of funds at home. So, one day, the entire thing is empty. Odd. I refill the cabinet and 2 days later, all of it is gone again. Refill with the last of my supplies and catch the kid in the act of sweeping everything in his bag. I stop him, take him in the other room, and talk to him. He told his mother about the cabinet. She ordered him to bring her everything he could get. She was returning the items to Walmart for store credit to buy cigarettes and beer. I told him to tell her the cabinet is locked now. I bought a bike lock. It was sickening. A mother came to a school sports day swigging from a bottle of wine. We always felt desperately sorry for her daughter, because whenever she returned to school following a holiday at home, this was a boarding school, we had to wash all of her clothes because they reeked of cigarettes, and this poor little girl was easily the most unhappy child I've ever seen. Woman I used to babysit for worked at a school as an assistant or some crap in Toronto. She always told this story about how the class rabbit would go home with a new kid each weekend. They kept trying to avoid giving one kid the bunny for the weekend because it was clear his home life wasn't the best, but they finally caved in and let him take the rabbit home. The parents killed the rabbit and ate it. They killed the class bunny and fried it up for dinner. They weren't even ashamed when they told the teacher what happened on Monday. Said they were out of groceries or something. A likely story, but what if the boy simply wanted to keep the rabbit for himself forever? You deprived him of taking the rabbit home for so long, and when he finally had the chance to have the rabbit all to himself, he decided, well, what's stopping me from keeping it? Just make up a likely lie and it'll be all his. But if they did actually eat the rabbit, that is totally messed up. Well, in my profession, it's more often what the parents don't do that wins them the Parent of the Year award, but I do have a couple Hall of Famers. I'm a special education teacher, so I deal with kids with all kinds of physical, emotional, and academic disabilities. I took care of a little girl once who had a number of complications due to spina bifida. Her mother couldn't be bothered to take care of her. The little girl wore diapers and was cathed. She required 3 to 5 diaper changes a day. Mom would only send 5 diapers a week. The thing is, she was getting full services from her community, so she was being provided with plenty of supplies. We suspect Mom was probably selling the extras. I ended up just buying her diapers. Mom would not change her catheter regularly. We would change her out at school, but other than that, she'd go another 24 hours before a change out, longer if it was a weekend. The smell from the infections she'd get after a weekend was horrendous. She had lice constantly and oozing bed bug sores. Her mom told us to F off when we call her and tell her to take her to a doctor. Found out later in the year that she also had scabies. We offered to administer the medication and creams at school. Mom told us to go to hell. The girl would come to school in men's underwear, XXL shirts, and size 16 pants. She was 8. Finally discovered that her 9-year-old sister was changing her diapers and dressing her every day, and sister couldn't find any other cleanish clothes to put on her. Mom's response? I'm busy. I have to get to work in the morning. findings. Final straw was when the nurse discovered what appeared to be STD warts while changing her diaper one day. Nurse made, for the 10th time, another CPS report, but principal insisted that we call home and report our findings. Grandma found out, tipped off Mom, and Mom appeared at the school 15 minutes later, snatched up the kids, and disappeared. Investigators showed up 15 minutes later, but Mom was already long gone. Never saw the kids again. I was wondering to myself the entire time, where the hell are Child Protective Services and why is everyone in this story so freaking useless? I wouldn't really give a crap. That kid wouldn't go anywhere with that woman if it were on my watch. Staff raised money to get an 8-year-old girl a winter coat. We live in rural Canada. Girl came to school the next day in a t-shirt in the dead of winter, her mom wearing the brand new child-sized jacket. For those wondering, the principal confronted her about it, and Mom told her to F off, and anything her kids owned belonged to her and she could do whatever she wanted with it. Children's Aid was called and that student lives with a very nice foster family now. Mother was rail thin, looked like a stereotypical junkie archetype, sleeves were 3 inches too short, didn't cover most of her stomach, and she could do it up properly. Our vice principal is a former army sergeant who's built like a tank. He's well-liked and an amazing role model in a community where many of our kids don't have good male role models. On several occasions, I've seen mothers step well over the line and make very asexual comments to him directly in front of their kids. I mean in plain sight of their own children, and in ways the kids notice. He's always very respectful and often asks another member of staff to join him if he sees one of those parents coming to talk. But it's pretty damn trashy when it comes to some of the innuendos I've heard. These aren't jokes either, they tried to get handsy with him too. My cousin is a teacher and she once had a parent come to a parent-teacher conference extremely drunk and right before the meeting tried to pull out a bag of booger sugar and start doing lines. Police were called and so was CPS. The school also had to call 911 once because a parent overdosed in the parking lot while waiting to pick up their kid, and the poor kid was too young to understand why their mom was slumped over in their car. It's quite sad, but I actually also know a teacher or two who's had to look after kids whose parents, don't really look after them and they're kind of addicted to illegal substances, and it's just really sad knowing that stuff goes on and people are so irresponsible with their own lives when they have kids to look after. The sad fact of the matter is some people do not deserve to have children. I volunteer at after-school programs to help tutor. I had a student earlier this year. Good kid, loves math, loves computers, wants to be a programmer when he grows up. He's really struggling in 7th grade because he has no computer at home. We have to do his online assignments at the program, but we only meet twice a week. I pulled his mom aside and explained how he could be doing much better in school with some kind of PC and internet access at home. She says that she can't afford a computer. I tell her that for $200 I could piece all the parts together myself for a fully functional setup that would be sufficient for at least the next few years. I'd even build it with him so he could learn some extremely valuable information. I'd even front her half, but she'd have to pay me back. She says no way, still way out of her budget. Mind you, while we're having this conversation, she's barely looking up to speak to me, too busy scrolling through the gram on her phone. I say, screw it, I'll do it myself. Scrap together all the parts I can for free. I only had to buy an HDD. The setup was really out of date, but still worked. Gave it to them, kid was thrilled. About a month later, I noticed he's trying to finish all of his homework at the program again. I ask his mom if everything was okay with the computer. She says it broke down. I say, okay, what happened? I'll pick it up and try to fix it. She says she had to throw it away. I pull the kid aside and ask him. He tells me she sold it to her cousin for $50. I really don't like calling people trashy when they're apparently stuck in a culture of poverty. Maybe she needed that $50 for the light bill or groceries. But at the same time, she spends 3 times that amount on her cell phone each month, so it really just broke my heart. It was like she's doing everything in her power to ensure the kid has no frickin' chance at a decent life. I work in a school in one of the most socially deprived areas of the UK. At Parents' Evening, we give every parent a printout of their child's grades in each subject alongside their target grades. Last year, we had a parent of an 11-year-old respond to this printout by shouting, "What the F am I going to do with this? I can't effing read, can I?" This was in front of the other children, parents, and her child's teacher. After only 1 year in this school, there's actually a pretty long list of things I've seen parents do, or have heard other staff members claim to have seen parents do. too. Since a few people have asked, the school is in the Midlands. I don't want to be any more specific, just in case anyone figures out which school it is. People seem to be torn on seeing this as just trashy or more as sad, as if I might be picking on her a bit. Just to be clear, I'm not making fun of her. A quick laugh behind closed doors at things like this seems to give a bit of levity for a teacher in schools like mine. It can be tough, but I think the majority of people who work in these areas do it because they want to help conquer some of the social inequalities or issues that people are facing, whether that's for pure humanistic beliefs, their own ego, or just because it feels like you're accomplishing something. Maybe a bit of each. Regardless, I feel sympathy for the woman in question and her daughter. One of the aims of my job is to help prevent people reaching adulthood without the necessary skills to thrive. Her behavior doesn't change that. That doesn't make me assume I'm a higher class of person than she is, just dealt a different hand, I guess. At the mention of the Midlands, I just had to read it, and now I have to think about what school it could possibly be. Also, what a stupid thing to get angry about. No one can tell if you can read or not. Like, that's up to you to tell people. I called a parent about a behavioral issue. I must have been on speakerphone because I heard the kid come home. Parents start screaming at and wailing on the kid, cussing, calling them all sorts of names. I don't even know if the parents remembered I was on the phone. I hung up the phone and went to my principal. Teachers are mandated reporters. Don't hit your kids in front of a teacher. That should remind me, I had a really great school when I was a kid. The headmaster actually drove me to school on some days and even organized other teachers to drive me to and from school occasionally at the height of personal family issues as a kid. Teachers can seriously have the most positive effect on kids with bad home lives. Oh my god, I've worked in behavior units and juvies for a few years now, so you can imagine the families we get. 1. Took the kid out on the last day of term, pull into the driveway, and one of the kid's mothers is standing there, can of Monster in one hand, cigarette in the other, and wearing a miniskirt and knee-high boots in the middle of winter. 2. One grandparent used to come in wearing a dirty singlet with his belly hanging out and would try to kiss me and called me love, darling, and babe. 3. A kid left grounds without permission, so didn't have his phone, etc., which we confiscate. Mom came to pick it up, and when the principal tried to engage her in a conversation about her son's behavior, she attacked him with her handbag. I have 2. There is a parent who would walk through our closed campus every single day. As teachers, we are supposed to stop her because it's closed campus. Every single day, she would pretend she didn't know the rules. We always knew it was the same parent because she let her younger children, who weren't in school yet, ride around on their scooters ahead of her. One day, she was walking through with a stroller. She was not paying attention, and her freaking baby started falling out from the front of the stroller. I saw 4 teachers jump up to help the kid, and the mom didn't even acknowledge. The other one happened directly to me during parent-teacher conferences. I was meeting with a mom and her live-in boyfriend about her son. At the end of the conference, I asked if they had any questions I could answer for them, and he started asking me personal questions and flirting with me. I deflected and told them I had more conferences, but other teachers have told me that parents have hit on them before, so it's probably pretty common. Not a teacher, but a college administrator. Parents will call in very frequently when there is an issue with their student's living situation. If they're a butthole, frequent, I quote FERPA to them. Best example, I had to bill a student for around $600 in damage to their room at the end of the year. Mom called really angry about this because they had tried to repair the damages. Poorly, I should add. She ended up yelling about this over the phone, and I reminded her that her son was 22 years old and that I could only talk with him about this. Kid calls me back the next day and apologizes for his mom being such a B-word to me and asks if I could just lie to his mom when she calls back. It's a weird line of work. Not a teacher, but my dad once worked as a groundskeeper at a primary school. Worst thing he ever saw was a guy dropping his daughter off to school, and before she went through the gate, her dad went through her school bag and took out all of her packed food and left eating it, essentially leaving her with nothing to eat that day. Dad was so angry he said he wanted to knock the guy out right there and then for leaving his child with no food for the day, but he ended up going straight to the principal to tell them what he witnessed so it could be investigated properly and get the kid help. My kid went to the preschool run by the public school system. One day, I saw one of his classmates. Every student was either 3 or 4. Moms opened the front passenger door, and they drove off with the radio cranked and the little girl dancing on the seat, leaning against the dashboard. The back seat was totally empty, not even a car seat. The next day, I offered the lady my other kid's seat. I'd buy another one on the way home. She told me to F off and drove away with her daughter again, standing out on the front seat. I let the principal know, and we watched the car drive into the traffic towards the highway. Day 3. I've called the police, but they'll only come if I call during the pickup. Great, that'll only take 30 minutes for them to arrive after Mom drives off with the daughter dancing on the seat again. I tell the principal I'm reporting the mom to family services if she won't intervene. On day 4, a guy shows up in her car and comes nose to nose with me. Without even so much as an introduction, he says if I keep harassing his woman, I'll regret it. I tell the principal, nothing she can do. They stop bringing the kid to school after that. Parent witness to an event, not a teacher. My kid's very first day of school. She's 4.5. In the gym hall, all the kids and parents are in line according to class, and one by one the teachers come and take them away. Our group was last to go. As we're waiting, a guy storms in, clearly drunk, starts shouting at a woman in the line, "Why the F didn't you tell me it was now? I've been looking everywhere," etc., etc. He slaps the mom. Another dad in the line pulls drunk dad away and pushes him. He falls down on top of another kid. That kid's mom screams, drunk starts to run out, squished kid's dad chases him. He made it out of the gym but then got caught and the crap kicked out of him in the school reception. Everyone is freaked out. Kids are crying. Then the very happy teacher who is completely unaware comes in. I start Googling prices for private school. That doesn't sound like a single person involved responded the way that they really should have, although I do think the guy deserved a bit of a smack around the chops. Not a teacher anymore, but a registered nurse. Kid wakes up from dental surgery, a 4-year-old who needed a root canal. Several extractions and fillings, horrible dentition. Mom and dad nowhere to be found post-op. Eventually, they wander into the recovery room from the parking lot. Reeking of cigarettes and the devil's lettuce, proceed to give the 4-year-old a baby bottle of Mountain Dew. The pediatric dentist took the parents aside into a consult room to yell at them and lecture them. They told him to mind his own effing business, scooped up the kid and walked out. Saddest part was, I remember the poor kiddo had filthy feet and hair, also reeked of cigarettes. He looked so defeated already. All I could think was that this kid has an uphill battle for a decent life. Being a registered nurse is heartbreaking, not always for the reasons you'd expect. Not a teacher, but my mom is. She teaches the visually impaired. There are these 2 students of hers whose parents, mainly the mom, tell them that they can't do anything and won't be able to do anything, and all they do while at home is sit around because their mom makes them. However, my mom has been teaching them for about 4 years, trying to get them to believe in themselves. It mostly has worked, but recently a different teacher told them that they can't do anything as well, so that has been a huge setback for them. I just think that it's really trashy for a parent who tells their kid that they can't do anything, even though they can do many things that other people can. Or maybe it's a foreign concept to some people, but overcoming adversity, making the most of the hand you've been dealt, it's important to people's confidence, and this mother clearly does not do much for her son's confidence. Last year, I taught 5th grade. I had a student for 1 block a day that was a little mentally unstable. She developed a crush on another girl and began writing her a ton of creepy notes. The school was handling it, but apparently the second girl's mother didn't think that was enough, so they drove to the first girl's bus stop in the morning and started yelling and threatening her. They basically had her cornered when the bus driver showed up and had to pry this raging mom away from the student. The mom definitely shouldn't have reacted that way, but I gotta ask, how creepy were these notes? I used to work in a daycare, and on my first day in a new room with 15 to 24-month-olds, I picked up a little boy and noticed he had dropped something through the neck hole in his onesie. I pulled it out, and it was a lighter. When we returned it to the mom and told her where we found it, she laughed and said, "The kid gets his hands on everything." Poor kid also sounded like a smoker every time he laughed or coughed. End of day, parents were pulling up to the building to pick up their kids. 2 moms got into a physical fight in the parking lot when one of them pulled a baseball bat out of the trunk of her car. The families both jumped in and it was an all-out brawl. Went on a trip to America for the performing arts. Parent met their kids at the end of the trip for the last 2 days. Parent went out and got hammered both nights and would sneak into her student room, utterly off their face, and wake all the kids up to try and party. Tagged along to our final tour dinner with all the kids and got hammered again. Worst person ever. That sounds like a parent going through a midlife crisis and trying to relive the days of their youth because they're surrounded by younger people, maybe. And it's sad. Was in a parent-teacher conference as a middle school teacher. The kid starts talking about college. The parent looks at this kid and says, "You're not going to college. You're not smart enough." Like, WTF, how could you stifle your children that way? What a piece of crap. Not a teacher, but definitely saw it happen. Dude talks trash about this girl's cousin. Yes, cousin, of all things. There are tight groups of friends, and her friends were not happy and confronted him. Next day, his mom has the audacity to come over and threatens the entire staff and students with some special injection that will make them mentally impaired. As if she showing up to defend her son, who is to blame, was not surprising enough, she goes on to throw an absolute tantrum of accusations and consequences. Our principal, who is a loudmouth retired general, just stood there dumbfounded. Lady coming in like Paptimus Scirocco from Zeta Gundam, being all like, yeah, well, you're gonna be pooing in nappies for the rest of your life when I'm done with you. Ah man, if anyone's out here looking for anime recommendations and likes mechas, give Gundam a shot. In fact, start with Gundam Thunderbolt. It is so sick, it will get you into the franchise probably. Not a teacher, but leader of a camp for children. We had a child, let's call him Bob, about 8 years old. After 3 days of camp and 11 more to come, we found out he already run out of clean socks. Well, we called his mother and she told us they are from far away and they can't drive there or send them. After about 10 minutes of talking, we came to the conclusion that we will wash his dirty socks and she will bring new ones on the visiting day. Visiting day is in the middle of the camp, and as it came, his mother showed up. We were kind of surprised, because she sounded like she did not care over the phone. Visiting day ended and all the children were supposed to go to the forest to play games and forget about parents for the next 7 days. That is when Bob told us his mother took all of his socks, even those he had on his feet. We called Bob's mother again, and she just said it is our problem, so take care of it, and hung up. I called my mother and asked if she had any socks left from when I was young. She luckily had, and drove them to us. Bob left with 10 new pairs of socks and never came to our camp again. That essentially sounds like the mother was taking out the inconvenience that basically came of their lack of preparedness on the child by taking away all the socks, which is really screwed up behavior. Some people, again, just don't deserve to be parents. That might sound kind of extreme, but this lady just sounds vindictive and generally spiteful.
Redditors who have been kidnapped. What was your experience like? Are there things you do now that you would have never done before? Serious replies only. My father, quote, kidnapped me when I was 7, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I lived with my alcoholic mother and her insane boyfriend. I wasn't abused physically, but looking back, the mental abuse and neglect was very traumatic. Some borderline child called it things. Anyways, my father had visitation rights and picked me up every other weekend. One weekend, he came to get me and saw that I had not eaten much. Food was almost always under lock and key, and my mom and her boyfriend were nowhere to be found. So, my father told me, pack your stuff. We spent some time hiding out at different places with family, friends, even hotels in Laughlin and Vegas. It was like a mini vacation. I even remember staying at my dad's girlfriend's house when the cops showed up. I hid under the bed while they talked to her. At the end of the day, I never had to go back to my mom's boyfriend's house, and my father won majority custody. I'm not sure how I would have turned out if I had stayed there. Thanks, Dad. When I was maybe 10 or 11, my neighbor kidnapped me. She was this single woman in her 50s who was always super nice to me. She was always on her porch, and she'd wave when I came home from school. Anyway, I was walking home from school and she was waving as usual, but this time she was beckoning me over. I went up to her porch and she asked me if I wanted some meatloaf she made. I freaking loved meatloaf, and she seemed harmless, so I said yes. I expected her to come outside with a plate or something, but instead, she called me in and told me to sit downstairs. I felt weird about it, but I followed her into her basement and sat down on a couch. She brought me a plate of meatloaf and I watched Pokemon 2000 on VHS. She had a freezer with those tube popsicle things too. After I ate, I told her I needed to go home, and she told me my parents called and asked her to keep me while they ran errands. I felt weird about it and suspected she was lying, but I just kind of went along with it. I remember I asked her if I could get my Game Boy at one point from my house, and she said my parents told me not to let me out of her sight. I remember watching Men in Black and falling asleep. When I woke up, I tried leaving, but the door was locked. She left some banana pudding for me on the table for when I woke up, so I just had that and went back to sleep. She opened the door at like 5 in the morning, woke me up, and asked me if I wanted to go home. She looked like she'd been crying. I told her yes, and she let me go. My parents asked me where I was, and I just told them I went home with a friend after school. I didn't have a cell phone, so it was pretty normal for me to just be gone for a day. I didn't see my neighbor on her porch the next Monday, so I knocked on her door. She came outside, and we talked on the porch about stuff. We never talked about that night, and she probably thought I didn't even realize what happened. She didn't say, but I think she had a kid who died a couple years prior and wanted to fill the gap. I never hated her for it or anything. Until I moved a couple years later, I would sit on her porch after school most days, and she listened to my neat facts about space. My sisters and I were kidnapped by our father repeatedly between the ages of 2 and 4. He would take us from our mother. She had brain damage and a serious drug problem, beat us if we made noise, and lock us in a closet and forget to feed us for days at a time. Each kidnapping lasted between 2 weeks and 6 months, depending on how long it took for my mother to realize we were gone and ask for help. He was a very scary man. He just wanted money from the state, food stamps and welfare. He would also try to get money out of my maternal grandmother. In fact, she's the only reason the cops kept getting involved in trying to locate him. She had money and influence, and used it. I don't remember much because I was so young, but I remember being scared, and in pain, and a uniformed cop opening a door and letting light in. I was terrified of being locked in the dark for years after, and sandy-haired men with mustaches still can make me very nervous. I'm 41 now. When I got divorced, my kids were almost the exact same age as my sisters and I were when the kidnapping started. It was a struggle to keep those old fears in check. I posted this on a different account I don't remember the password for. This is a long one, but it gets good. 2 years ago, I was very hungover on a summer Saturday in Manhattan. A girl I was seeing at the time was angrily getting her things together and proceeded to storm out of the apartment, which was shared by myself and 4 other guys. My old roommates had moved to a new apartment the night before. There are boxes and miscellaneous crap everywhere. I'm laying in bed, dying. It's around 9 or 10 a.m. About 5 minutes after the girl storms out, there's a knock at the door. She must have forgotten her phone charger or something. I get up in my boxers, walk across the living room where all the unpacked and half-packed crap is, and open up the door. Behind the door was one of the scariest faces I've ever seen. Very beady eyes, thick mustache, scarred up face, balding man in his 50s. I was holding the door slightly ajar. Since it wasn't who I thought it was, I stepped behind the door a bit to hide my pale body and stuck my head through the crack. He asked if Billy was home, one of my old roommates. I told him that Billy had moved out the day before. With that said, he put all of his body weight into the door, sending me flying back. This dude was enormous. As I was recovering from this and trying to think why someone would be so angry with Billy, this gentleman open hand slaps me so hard I hit the ground. I am now awake. My new house guest identifies himself as Big Tony and demands to speak with Billy. I go into my room, right off of the living room where Big Tony is now setting up shop, and put on pants and grab my phone. Tony has already made it very clear not to call the police or try to run out of my apartment, or I might fall out of the window or get shot in the knees. Apparently, Billy owes him a lot of money. I call Billy, who says he's never heard of Big Tony, and Billy is convinced it's a joke. Tony asks for the phone, where I hear Billy telling Big Tony to go screw himself and to get out of his old apartment. Tony is now upset and starts telling Billy that his roommate, myself, might get hurt if he doesn't learn some manners and come to the old apartment. Billy hangs up. Tony, for some reason, took a liking to me. He apologized for the slap, gave me cigarettes, and said he hoped that this would all work out. He constantly comments on the fact that I'm living like an animal since there's stuff all over the apartment, and asking if me and my old roomies watch betting sports. We never watched sports, never had cable. He asks if Billy's last name is something, which it isn't, then asks if Billy is from somewhere, that he isn't, and then asked if Billy is enrolled in a university, that he isn't. I inform Big Tony that I'm fairly confident he is in the wrong apartment. Just as I'm getting him to back off and believe that there might be more than one Billy living in an apartment building, there was another knock at the door. Quote, "If it's the cops or your parents, I'm the maintenance guy." My parents were coming to help me move out that afternoon. I open the door and it's Henry, another one of my old roommates. I inform him he's picked a bad time as he's already waltzing inside to get some things. Tony poses as my uncle for a few minutes before I intervene and tell Henry that this giant man is looking for Billy, who he believes owes him money. "Henry, do you guys gamble?" "Yeah, we gamble all the time." We play dice and cards a lot. I try explaining to Tony that we don't gamble on sports, but now we have to go through the whole gambit again. After another half hour of questions with Henry, Tony is back to believing he is in the wrong apartment. He calls his, quote, coworker to get a picture texted to him. It's not Billy. Okay. I tell Tony good luck and try to shoo him out of the apartment. No, it's never that easy. Tony wishes to take Henry and I out for coffee and donuts, his personal apology. I refuse. He won't have it. I'm in a Starbucks ordering donuts and coffee, which we consume in a nearby park, and listen to Tony's stories. Half an hour later, he says we can leave. At this point, it didn't seem like we were being kept though, and we head back. Naturally, no one believes us. We have a party in the old/pretty empty apartment. I stay at a friend's place in the building and wake up to knocks. Straight up Nom flashbacks. It's my buddy Tom, who also lives in the building. He tells me someone's outside looking for me. Great. I get dressed and head outside to find Big Tony, who gives me a grocery bag filled with beer and cigarettes. Tom and a few other friends from the building come outside and we drink beer in styrofoam cups on the street whilst listening to Tony's stories. Everyone believes Henry and I, and if I'm ever in Tony's neighborhood, I should call him for dinner on him. TLDR, I got Big Lebowski'd. This happened a while ago when I was 6. I come from a third world country, and at the time, kidnappings were at an all-time high. We lived in a fairly nice neighborhood, no kidnappings there, no theft, great neighbors. We felt pretty safe, and therefore, my mom wasn't too worried. Our house was a gated residence, so we had a front yard and a backyard. I was out one morning in the front yard, playing with some toys while my mom was inside working or cooking or whatever. Someone knocked on the front gate. Me, being a dumb child, decided to go up and ask who it was. It was this fairly old man who asked for some water. Me, being the nice helping child, opened the door and was snatched immediately. I don't particularly remember what happened after that, but I woke up in a compound which I'm pretty sure was far from home. They hadn't done anything bad to me as far as I know, but they did try to feed me food that I didn't like. I was a picky child, and so all I ate was fruit. They had asked for ransom, which to this day I don't know how much it was. They just kept me in a room all day with duct tape on my mouth and ropes around my feet and hands. They did take the duct tape off to let me drink water or eat food. Anyways, a few days later, the police busted them and arrested them. They ended up in jail for life is what I was told. Not too long after that, my parents decided to move to a different country and now all is well. I still think about what might have gone wrong if they had sold me into child slavery or something, fairly common in my country. Life resumed after that. I'm as happy as a 20-year-old can be. Nothing really changed. I still don't know why I was kidnapped, maybe for ransom or whatever. In exactly a month, it'll be my 14th kidnapping anniversary. Not much like the other stories here, but my ex-boyfriend abducted me from my parents' home when I was 19, threw me in the trunk of his car and drove off. About 8 hours later, a lot happened in between, including me getting out of the trunk and into the back seat. The police spotted his car and engaged in a high-speed pursuit. He crashed into a tree, served about 4 years, and is out with a wife and 3 kids now. It didn't affect me as much as people expected it to, and I haven't really changed anything in my life because of it. It happened in the past, and that's how I view it. My mother kidnapped me. My parents were in the middle of an ugly divorce and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. Since she depended on my father for money, she assumed she would lose me in the custody battle. My mother is a dual Canadian and American citizen. My father is American. So one day when my dad was at work, she didn't send me to school and took me from USA to Canada. There was nothing my dad could do because we weren't in the USA. It was several months before my mom decided to do the quote, right thing and go back to the States. By that time, my dad has lawyered up so well, she basically lost all rights to parenting me. This happened when I was 6 to 7. My mother ended up moving back to Canada to be with her family. If I could go back, I would have begged my mom not to return to the States. What the courts didn't care to hear was that my dad was a quote, functioning alcoholic. He was abusive in every way. When my parents divorced, my mom couldn't afford to live in the USA. So I was raised by my abusive father for another decade until I moved out at 17. He had me too terrified to tell anyone, just like my mom was. I'm now 28 and trying to build positive relationships with both my parents now that I've forgiven both of them. TLDR, mom kidnapped me and took me from USA to Canada. Several months later, mom felt guilty and returned me to the USA. So back when I was around 7 or 8, my family went to visit our home country of Pakistan. Anytime someone from the USA comes and visits Pakistan, it's kind of a big deal depending on where you're going. Where we visited was a small village of maybe 200 or so people, and so word gets out fast that, quote, rich Americans are coming. This makes us targets, as people believe we come with pockets full of treasures and gold and money. Anyways, I'm with my cousin, who at the time was also 8, at a sketchy arcade place. Sketchy because it only had like 3 games, and it was located in the back of a beat-up mini-store. So I'm playing, and my cousin tells me it's time to go, but I was so into the game that I didn't want to go. He leaves, and I stayed. As I'm playing, these two guys come into the arcade room and just start watching me play and start giving me comments on how good I was. And when I responded back in English, not the native language of Punjabi, so they knew I was an American. Next thing I know, they grab me by the hands and tell me to come with them. All I remember is crying while they drag me in the daylight in front of other people to some house. Once at the location, an old lady, who I assume was their mother, was frantic and asking who I am and why I was crying and why I was there. The guys told her to pretty much shut up and threw me into a room. I remember just standing at the door of the room and banging and crying for what seemed like hours, and every now and then they would tell me to shut up or they would hurt me, but I kept crying and banging. After what seemed like many hours, the woman/mom opened the door and told me to run home. I booked it so fast out of there, but I had no clue where I was. I just ran, and whenever I would see a kid or a woman, I would ask where the arcade was because I knew how to get home from there. Pakistan is notorious for what they do to little kids, especially young boys. Young boys are used for trafficking, and so, reflecting back on this incident, I would say I was one lucky kid, because God knows where I would be today. I met a man online who was around my parents' age. He pelted me with compliments and told me how pretty I was and everything a teenage girl wants to hear. I met him in secret every other weekend for 3 months. I would tell my parents I was staying at a friend's house, and then he and I would get a hotel room for the weekend. He started getting really controlling, bordering on physically abusive, so after a particularly harsh fight, I told him I didn't want to see him anymore. A few months later, he showed up at my job as I was leaving and told me he wanted me to come to his house, 2 hours away, so we could talk about stuff. I told him I had nothing to say to him and tried to leave. He told me he had recorded us in bed, and if that I didn't go with him, he would make sure my parents, my siblings, and my boss got a copy of it. That we were just going to talk so he could explain why he acted the way he had. I was terrified of my parents finding out that I'd been lying and sleeping with a guy their age, so I went with him. He made me drive his car there, probably because we had to go through a toll booth with a camera and it would look less against my will if I was the one driving. We got to his house and he immediately turned violent. He shoved me into his room and locked the door. He ended up keeping me there for a week. During that time, he pretended to be my father and called in to work for me. He made me sign on to all of my accounts online, email, AIM, MySpace. He had a keylogger set up on his computer, so now he had all of my passwords. He took my phone the moment we got to his house. He wrote a quote, script, and had me call nearly everyone in my phone and tell them that I didn't want to be friends with them anymore and never to contact me again. One day, he took me for a drive to this park bordering a river and told me that that was where he was going to bury me. That night, I started actively fighting back. Prior to that, I thought he was just going to let me go eventually. I kicked him in the testicles and hit him in the face, but that only made him mad, and he shoved me on the bed and knelt on my back with my hands behind my back while screaming at me and whacking me in the side of the head. He was so ticked off that night that he used my phone and called my dad around 6 in the morning and left him a voicemail saying, "You don't know where your daughter really is or what she's been up to, and you never will." My dad called my phone probably 20 to 30 times. The guy eventually was afraid he'd tell the police, so he had me answer and told me to tell my dad it was all a joke. He sat pretty much on top of me and told me if he caught me trying to tell him where I was, he would kill me. I told my dad my friends and I had been drinking and it was one of my friends' idea of a prank. When I was little, I had this friend who I would play with, but she always wanted me to spend the night and would pressure me into calling and asking my parents. My dad came up with a trick where he would ask me, "Are you going to watch wrestling tonight?" And if I said yes, it meant I wanted to stay. If I said no, it meant I wanted him to say I could not stay. At the end of our phone call, for the first time in probably 10 years, he asked, "Are you going to watch wrestling tonight?" And I said no. When we hung up, he called the police and called all of my friends that he could get a hold of. He eventually called the one friend who I had told about this guy, and he had all of his info, name, phone number, everything. Within 24 hours, I was safe at home, confessed everything to everyone, got a bunch of phone calls from friends who were confused and worried, and everything worked out. I never ever go anywhere without multiple people knowing where I'll be and who I'm with. I carry pepper spray and a self-defense weapon, and I never met another person online. I'm 31 now, and it's still something I think about more often than I like to. I was a victim of parental kidnapping as a child. It was terrifying because I knew the situation was wrong and I shouldn't have been with my mother, but even when I could put together words to say that, I was scolded because, no, that's your mother. Your mother can't kidnap you. It was one of many events that made me lose all faith in, quote, authority figures. Since it happened when I was young, I don't do anything different in my life as an adult, but I do get very annoyed when people complain about having to sign out their kid from daycare and facing any sort of hurdles when taking their kid out of school or daycare early. Familial kidnapping is real and could be as traumatizing, if not more so, than stranger kidnapping. I was lucky that mom just wanted her sympathy ticket. I was forced to march in front of a BOV, an armored personnel carrier, with 20 other people who had been rounded up by the VRS, the Army of the Republika Srpska. We marched in camp with them for 2 weeks and were used as human shields around vehicles and outposts. About 4 of us were shot, and 3 of us had died before I was taken to give stitches to some sort of officer who had a gash in his leg, and I was able to negotiate my release and the release of one woman who I had marched with, who was also able to pay. I wouldn't say I do things differently now, but it drained the life out of me completely at the time. Any desire I had before that to stay and ride the war out was totally gone. To this day, I have an extremely derisive attitude towards war and resent those who start them. Used to go running in my area when I was in high school. I've had older men offer me rides and follow me around, driving really slow back and forth past me, giving me the creeper eyes. I've even had women try and offer me into their car. One guy in a crappy rusty red van followed me for 20 minutes. I remember the look in his eyes, leaning back into his car, shirtless. I remember crossing the road several times and he kept making U-turns. I eventually faked crossing the road at one point and jumped a brick wall into this guy's yard. A huge dog came running out to meet me. I chose the dog versus the guy. The dog ran up to me to attack and simply licked me. An old dude came outside and I told him about it. I helped him work on his old Jaguar for hours before I felt safe to run home. Also, I'm a guy, and this was when I was 16 to 17 years old. I can't imagine how a woman may feel. I just got my concealed weapons permit and I'm working on getting my GF hers. Screw creepers. I am Peter Moore, the longest held hostage in Iraq, kept captive for over 2.5 years. In April of 2007, I accepted a 3-month posting in Iraq working for the American IT consulting firm Bearing Point. I arrived in Baghdad on the 2nd of April 2007, where my main job was to develop spending reports from the computer system used within the Ministry of Finance. On the 29th of May 2007, around 100 Iraqi police officers from the Ministry of Interior entered the building and took away myself and 4 British guards. For 6 months, I was moved around, meeting up with the British guards. In December of 2007, I was separated from the other Britons and was held with 2 Americans. In June of 2007, I was transported back to Baghdad, and this was the last time I had contact with any of the other hostages. In May of 2009, the number 2 commander of the militia, Laith al-Khazali, was released from U.S. custody in exchange for the bodies of 2 of the British guards. In September, over 100 militia were released in exchange for the body of one of the guards. On the 30th of December 2009, 946 days, or 2 years, 7 months, and 1 day, after I was captured, I was released in exchange for the militia leader Qais al-Khazali. The last of the hostages' bodies were eventually handed over in early 2012.
Teachers of Reddit, what's the funniest reason you've had to send someone to the principal's office? Not entirely the principal's office because they were kindergartners, but 2 boys turned off the lights in the bathroom, had their pants around their ankles, chasing each other around in the dark and peeing on each other. That was a weird one to explain to the parents. I work at a daycare and we couldn't figure out why the bathroom smelled like pee so bad even though it gets cleaned twice a day. After a few days, one of the teachers was tying a boy's shoes when she looked into the bathroom and saw another boy peeing directly into the floor drain. Apparently, half the class was peeing down the drain instead of into the toilet. Unfortunately enough for young kids, peeing is funny, and they tend to go places with that. A kid dropped a folder full of Xeroxed copies of his hairy butt. Turns out he'd been taping them to people's lockers all over school. Maybe someone told him he had a nice butt and he felt obliged to share it with the rest of the world. My dad worked as a teacher in a school for misguided youth. On the first day, he wrote his name on the board as new teachers do, and when he turned his back towards the class, a kid had lit his desk on fire with hairspray and was just laughing. 3-foot-high flame no more than a foot away from him. I had a 6th grader who was, just to paint the picture, a human incarnation of Ralph Wiggum, who wanted to get out of class so desperately that first he raised his hand and said his ears were ringing and he needed to go to the nurse. Sorry kid, not falling for it. 20 seconds later, he raised his hand and said his tongue was burning and needed to go to the nurse. Not falling for it, Ralph. 10 seconds later, he had blurry vision. He was squishing his eyes with his hands. No dice, kid. And then, in the grand finale, he stands with a flourish and yells so loud that teachers all down the hall stuck their heads out into the hallway. My dong is bleeding! We all stood mouths agape until the one wise guy in the class adds, "And you want the nurse to look at it?" What did this kid have to get out of class so bad for that he felt the need to yell that to everybody? I didn't send him to the office, but one of my favorite moments was one time I was working with a small group while other students worked on independent stuff around the room. One student was working pretty close to me and obviously made a mistake because he exclaimed, "Crap!" except he didn't say crap. So I said, "Excuse me, Ty? What was that?" And he says, "Oh, I didn't say what you think I said, miss." And I said, "Oh, good. What did you say?" He says, "I said shit," obviously thinking very hard. And then just stared at me horrified. I was trying so hard not to laugh, but I just told him, "I thought that's what you said. Please don't use that language in my classroom." We were doing sketch comedy in 6th grade a few years back, and seeing as it was a nice day, we went outside to practice. From across the field, I see one of my students very clearly and aggressively trying to put his junk on a prone classmate. When I asked him, he said it was for his sketch, and he was playing a character named the Iron Teabag. The best was the follow-up text from my boss saying, "I had to Google what teabagging was before I met with the kid." Sounds like they may have an instant classic on their hands. I had a kid show up to band with a massive black adult toy instead of his clarinet, and he honestly thought I wouldn't notice. Dude, everybody's gonna notice. Not a teacher, but a classmate in my drafting class was sent to the dean for 3D rendering a massive dong. My teacher saw it, commended him for his work, and asked him to print it out. He then stapled it to a referral and sent him to the dean. Glorious. Not a teacher, but we had an older lady as a science substitute in 8th grade. It was a hot June day and the windows were open. We were on the 2nd floor. My friend told the sub when she walked in the classroom that Jimmy had fallen out the window. When the sub looked out the window, she saw Jimmy lying on the ground contorted, and she passed out. We never got a chance to explain to her that it was a joke. He had just laid down on the sidewalk under the window. The 2 boys got suspended and that sub never came back. You guys probably left her with a very traumatic memory. I'm a male 5th grade teacher. One of my boys yelled out right before the 3:15 bell rang, "Everybody be quiet, I have a boner." I was like, did he just say that? The way he said it made me giggle like a schoolgirl. Luckily, no one noticed me turn and bust out laughing. No one else really seemed to notice what he had said. The bell rang to go home and I call him over. I asked him if he knew what that was. Very innocently, he said no. Then I thought, oh great. I could tell by his face that he wasn't lying. So I said, well, it's when your private parts get hard. Right when I said that, he got this very scared look on his face and said, I promise I didn't know that. Like I said, I could tell he wasn't lying. I had a very hard time keeping a straight face. He said his friend had yelled that out once, so he thought he would. I told him he can't say those kinds of things, and he has to be careful what he says. He walked away very embarrassed. I laughed and laughed when he left the room. Kids at that age be saying some crazy things without really knowing what they're talking about. A girl got so drunk that she locked herself in the bathroom. We found her and obviously had to call her parents to come take her home. We kept telling her, listen, it's your dean and you have to unlock the door. She kept responding in the horrible drunk teenager voice, now you listen, I'm your dean. It was very difficult for us to not break down in laughter. Stupid kids. Getting drunk at school doesn't exactly sound like a good time. 2 of my 5th grade students were arguing on our way back to music class, so I went over to see why they were talking in line. I asked what was going on, and the first kid said that the other kid had called him gay. The second kid looked me straight in the eye and said, I didn't call him gay, I called him a B word. I sent them on their way to the principal's office and sarcastically thanked them for the extra paperwork. I worked in a computer-based classroom at one point where the students took many of their classes online. Some of them tried to cheat the system by copying and pasting short phrases into all the fill-in-the-blank or essay responses, hoping it'd glitch and pass them through. Quickly discovered one student had been pasting homo 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 into all his responses, which backfired pretty well in one particular instance. Question: copy the words that apply to you. Answer: homo homo homo. I hope you marked them all incorrect except for that one. First year of high school, I got sent to the principal's office by my near-retirement teacher for breaking dress code with my t-shirt that had drug references and paraphernalia on it. The funny part was when my principal had to explain to my teacher that Billabong is a legitimate clothing company name, and nothing more. In 6th grade, during a school mass, my buddies made up a thing called Wiener Whack Wednesday. Self-explanatory. Go around nut-tapping everyone. Well, our really hot teacher caught 2 kids doing it, and we had a whole lecture our next period. She asked if any of us knew anything about it, and all the girls told the teacher what was up. Every single guy in our class, 15 at the time, small Catholic school, got called to the office. We had to take turns talking to the principal and explaining that none of us were gay. Then she made us call our parents. I was really freaking out that my father would think I was gay. I love how this is going on and that's their concern. Not the fact that y'all are just whipping it out and smacking each other with it, as long as you're not gay. Not a teacher, but saw a kid stand up in Russian class to do a speech on a topic of World War II Russia. He decided to do the whole speech on why Hitler was the greatest. Now, our teacher was born in Russia, grew up during the Soviet Union, and came to Minnesota to teach. She was horrified. If you think that the United States hates Hitler and Nazis the most, you've not studied Russia in World War II. I was glad, because this knucklehead and his douchey friends ruined Russian class for 4 years. I had this obnoxious, smarmy, show-offy 5th grader. One day, he was up to his usual tomfoolery, and a girl silently got up, opened the classroom pencil sharpener, and dumped the shavings all over the kid. I had to send her to the office, but it was a truly satisfying moment for the whole class. Sounds like she was willing to take one for the team there. I was covering another teacher's class in a computer lab, and we have a program called Net Support that basically allows you to spy on the kids' computers. It also serves some legitimate instructional purposes, like allowing you to take control of a kid's computer so you can demonstrate things. Only this teacher never used it, so I don't think the kids knew it existed. I normally don't use it because I don't like the Big Brother vibe it gives off, but there was a kid being a totally obnoxious jerk. He was looking up stupid and distracting videos and laughing loudly about them and making obnoxious comments to show off in front of his friends. I could have blocked YouTube, but instead I took control of his computer. I started typing in kitten videos into YouTube, My Little Ponies, anything that I could think of that wouldn't be cool for him or his friends. Then, every time he started to freak out and insist to his friends that he wasn't doing it, I gave him back control, and shortly after would take it away again. Then finally, I made a little pop-up come up on his screen that said, "I'm watching you." I expected him to figure out what was going on, but I think he got freaked out instead. It never seemed to occur to him that it was me, so I gave him control back and he did his work quietly for the rest of class. We had this in the engineering building. I was a teacher's assistant and this kid was playing some flash game rather than doing whatever design project he was supposed to be doing. So I would wait until just as he was about to beat a level and ever so slightly screw him up. He didn't know I had this ability, so he was getting crazy frustrated. Seeing him get visibly frustrated, I went over to his desk and said something along the lines of, "I know the program can be hard to learn. Let me see what you've got so far and I'll help." Oh, the shame he had when he turned high screen and didn't even have SolidWorks or whatever open. If I were you, I would have just kept messing with him for the rest of the day. I went to a small Catholic high school in the Seattle area. We had monthly mass in our gym, and every year around Easter we did the Stations of the Cross. Mass was always brutal, but the stations lasted 2.5 hours or so. Unreal. A little background, I couldn't burp until I was in my early 20s. I have no clue why, but any built-up gas had only one exit. Growing up, I farted to the point that people thought I had a medical condition. People even called me Fart Boy. Anyway, it was my senior year and we were headed headed to the dreaded stations of the cross mass. My friends and I had let one rip in class a number of times, but never during mass. We always talked about doing it, but never mustered the courage. I decided about a week before that this would be the day. The mass was set up where the choir would sing before each station. I think there were 11 or something. And then the priest would ramble on about its significance. Each time the choir stopped, there would be about 10 seconds of complete silence. We're on the 5th station and the choir is finishing when all of a sudden, I unleashed a behemoth right as everything went silent. I was sitting on gym bleachers, which probably amplified the blast perfectly. I remember the guy in front of me inexplicably holding a yellow plastic screwdriver, and he dropped it. In shock or from the blast wave, we'll never know. My buddy and I proceeded to muffle our laughter for at least an hour until mass ended. I've never tried to not laugh for that long before or since. Each time one of us would start to settle down, the other would release a cackle that started the whole process over again. We didn't even get in trouble. I'm sure the teachers thought it was an accident or never wanted to speak of it again. I'm laughing right now. One of my favorite memories. In high school, I got called into the principal's office. They put a screenshot of the Urban Dictionary entry for Cleveland Steamer in front of me and asked why I was looking at that. I laughed my butt off and said I was just doing some research and got sent back to class. Guys, I'm going to tell you right now, don't Google it. I used to work in a super strict school for kids who got kicked out of their regular schools. We had an assembly twice a day, morning and afternoon, that was extremely serious. Kids had to sit up straight with their hands in their laps, girls on one side and boys on the other, totally silent, that kind of thing. Occasionally, when we were having behavior problems with entire groups, we'd make them sit in assembly for the remainder of that period or however long until they could get it together. There was a class of middle schoolers, naturally, who could not stop farting. They'd intentionally fart as loud as they could to be gross and disruptive, and it even evolved into them getting up out of their seats and farting on each other. This is hilarious to me now, but it got really old and really smelly. Anyway, one day it was happening so much throughout each class that we took them to assembly. I'm standing in front with one of the other teachers, and our principal was talking to them, except he was mad. So he's pacing back and forth, reaming these kids out, punching his fist into his hand, spit flying out of his mouth. His face is bright red. He's saying all this stuff about respect, and then he adds in, "Oh, and if you have to fart?" And he yelled the word fart with such venom and disdain that I just lost it right there in front of everyone. I could not stop laughing. I tried to play it off like a coughing fit or something, but I couldn't. I had to leave the room. Not a teacher, but the last time I was sent to the principal's office was over a live chicken in high school. The high school I went to used the 8-block schedule system. My last period teacher was afraid to the point of hilarity of birds. We had chickens at home, and since they were 4-H chickens, they were quite docile. I put one in a duffel bag one morning and then put it in the top shelf of my locker. They'll just fall asleep if it's dark. So once last period came, I put it in the bag. She was used to us all bringing bags in since it was last period, and when she got up to put the attendance slip on the door, I just took it out of the bag and put it in the middle of the room. Hilarity ensued, and I spent the next day playing Pokemon in suspension in the cafeteria. Is it really suspension if they just let you hang out and play Pokemon? The year was 1987. Second grade me decided to bring the Penthouse mags I found under my dad's bed to school. I found them the night before and thought up this whole plan. It was cold, so I slid them in between the pocket of my jacket before leaving in the morning. Shortly thereafter on the playground, I was showing my buddies all these beautiful women. Finally, get to class and found out my teacher was ill and was replaced by a sub. Thinking I had it made, I slid the mags under all my papers in my box and just went about my day. Just before lunch, the sub started going through boxes, searching for a folder for the neighboring teacher. That's when she screamed. The sub was waving the Penthouse at me while dragging me to the principal's office. To make things that much better, my sweet 80-year-old grandma was the one to pick me up. I made the mistake of leaving a 9th grader in my classroom when he missed the bus home. I had to go to a meeting and it was pouring rain, so I let him stay. I told him not to use the computers. The meeting was in the computer lab. We were learning how to see all of the students' computers on our own screens. The tech guy had us all pull up our first period classes on our monitors to test it out. No student should have been logged onto a computer at the time. All the screens should have been blank. I saw that a very conservative Jehovah's Witness teacher in the row ahead of me had one screen lit up on her multi-screen view. I watched as she clicked on the screen to see it larger. She gasped. She made a small whining sound. It was anime-style adult content. It was the screen of the student I had left alone in my room. The teacher quickly turned around, calling my name very loudly, and asked if the student was in my classroom. I told her he was. I got up and went to the phone at the back of the room. I called my classroom number. The student answered. I said, "You're doing something you shouldn't be right now, aren't you?" He said, yeah. I said, "I suggest you turn it off right now." I heard footsteps running across the floor and a slam. He returned to the phone. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. We'll talk about this later," I said. I hung up. What an unlucky kid. He chose to watch that on the wrong day at the wrong time. I don't know about unlucky. Sounds like he just made a really bad decision. There was a student with autism who lived in a very literal world. We'll call him T. You had to be very precise with your words, as T could not comprehend slang or figurative language. He had an issue with another student at recess the day prior. It was something minor about a basketball. Basically, T had a basketball and placed it under the goal and walked away. Another student grabbed it, T became angry and ultimately gave the ball to the other student rather begrudgingly. Apparently, T told his uncle, and the uncle's response was, "I'd have made that kid eat a poop sandwich." Well, T made a quick stop by the litter box before coming to school. He also wrote a note to the other kids saying, "I get the ball today, you can have this poop sandwich." It wasn't a gesture he viewed as inappropriate. He actually thought the poop sandwich was a viable option for the other student. I had to send him to the office, but my god did I laugh. Even his mom laughed before apologizing. The principal still has the note in the office 2 years later. I'm sure the kid receiving the sandwich probably didn't find it as funny. I'm not a teacher, but my mother is. A kid in her class asked if she had any kids. At the time, I was my mother's only child. She mentioned me and the kid goes, "Well, what school does he go to?" And of course, my mom answers without hesitation. The kid goes, "Good, I'm gonna blow it up." Instantly expelled. Yeah, I don't think there's any other course of action to deal with something like that. I didn't even send the kid. I was too amused. I asked one of my students to come smash a giant spider on my desk. Being 9 years old, he walked up with an impressive swagger, trying to show all his friends how brave he was. He took one look at it and whispered, "Oh, F word." I was the only person who heard him, so I just stifled my laughter and told him I wouldn't write him up if he killed it. He did and was the talk of the lounge at lunch. I teach at a university, so I didn't send him to the principal, just out of class. I once told a student to leave class because he never brought his textbook and constantly played on his phone. So after 2 classes of this, I told him to get out because he was distracting other students. This kid freaked out, yelling and cursing at me. Keep in mind, I'm a 5'2" female and this kid's about 6 feet. The rest of the class is like, "What the heck?" And I stared him down and said, "Get the F out of my classroom!" Kid picked up his books and left. From that point on, anytime someone screwed up in class, the rest of the class would shout, "Get out of my classroom!" at them. They all thought it was hysterical that I cowed this giant. I mean, you gotta let them know who's boss early on.
Why cheat when you can leave the relationship? Because you can't cheat when you're not in a relationship. Duh. Some people get a dopamine hit in their brain from cheating and a sense of comfort and familiarity being in a relationship. They want both. Not proud of it, but I did it once upon a time. Never again. The rush and excitement of a new love is not worth all the guilt you feel, the pain you cause others, and the horrible feeling you get when you realize that you are not a nice person. I recently read a study where they measured the level of regret in women after episodes of high-risk SX. They were looking at hookup culture, but cheating was included. They identified a cycle of hookup, regret, and doing it again. They postulated that the purpose of regret as an emotion was to limit the behavior, and that regret might grow with subsequent episodes. However, what they found was that the level of regret diminished with each subsequent episode, such that after several flings, a woman engaging in high-risk SX has no regret at all. I recognize that hooking up is not exactly the same as cheating, but the study would suggest that once a cheater, always a cheater is not necessarily necessarily true. A person who arrests cheating behavior early might regain mastery over their behavior, i.e., it suggests a marriage can likely be salvaged after an isolated failure, but an ingrained pattern of behavior might be irredeemable. Therefore, the standard advice of kick her to the curb might not be the best option, and a more nuanced assessment would be more appropriate. However, a serial cheater is likely to have a hard time getting control of their compulsion, as their regret diminishes to zero. I'd love to hear opinions from women on this. I would also love to hear women's opinions on this. I asked myself the question when I had a woman who was trying to cheat on her husband with me. I was like, if she's as miserable as she says, why not leave? Had a friend give me this exact explanation, and it made a lot of sense. So much security and safety, and they are too lazy to make a change for themselves. I came close to cheating once, and it was because I didn't admit to myself just how unhappy I was in the relationship. I kept telling myself I can make it work. Then I was put in an environment that had several ladies that were happy to talk to me and be around me. That dopamine hit was massive, and I can 100% see how it can just happen. Luckily, I allowed myself to be honest about my feelings and broke up with my ex before I did anything. Do everybody a favor. Always be honest with yourself. That last bit, absolutely words to live by. From my understanding, it's better to have the safety net of the familiar and go do whatever than to end things and risk things not working out. Easier to use someone as a safe space and explore rather than taking the risk alone. I had a jerk of a housemate tell me once it's because it made the breakups easier for him. He'd cheat and make sure his partner found out, and that way they could get all mad at him and never want to speak to him again, and he could just go about his life like nothing happened. There's a certain thrill to sneaking around. Some people get off on the gotta hide whatever feeling they get from cheating. Also, if they leave the relationship, then they lose whatever perks of that relationship. It's hard to survive in the world on a single income. When there are kids and a mortgage involved, it's easier said than done. Not condoning it, but conventional and flawed wisdom often values stability and security over honesty. And sometimes people just get stuck in abusive, one-sided relationships, but their upbringing has taught them to stick through it, no matter how bad it gets. The short answer is that the person cheating is usually and often accurately perceives that they, and often their children and perhaps even their spouse, believe it or not, few cheaters simply don't care about their partner's well-being, would be financially devastated and emotionally traumatized by blowing up their shared household, and since no one cheats with an intent to get caught, this is the way to remedy the missing spark without sacrificing the household stability of everyone else. This is the kind of answer that comes from someone that purely values objects and money and doesn't actually care about anyone else's feelings while simultaneously trying to gaslight someone into believing that they are the least selfish person in the room. Like personally, I abhor betrayal and treachery of any kind. I'm not religious, and I only know this because I watched the frickin' Dante's Inferno video game movie with all the different styles and everything, but there is a reason why treachery is the 9th circle of hell. My marriage ended with infidelity. In my experience, it didn't happen all at once. It was a gradual thing. One year we were a little distant, then the distance grew cold, and then we were like two cubicle workers making our life run. But along the way, there were exciting milestones that made me think that we were succeeding, that we were happy. A graduate degree, the purchase of a little home together, the decision to try for a baby, the joy a year later when we finally succeeded, new jobs, the birth of our kid, moving to a new city. And there was heartbreak, the death of his father, my battle with postpartum depression, a job loss, illness in the family, my parents divorcing after 40 years of marriage. It was easy to point to those things as the reason we felt so apart. We weren't ready to admit that there was something broken between us two. So I assume when his co-worker was a sparkly new friend and they found themselves working late at the office more and more frequently over time, I'm sure their pull toward one another just grew. But here's the thing. My first marriage was over before he cheated. The question was, as Esther Perel puts it, was whether I would spend my second marriage with the same person. His new partner made it an easy answer for both of us. I don't blame the cheating for my divorce though. It was just a symptom of something already wrong. For me, his affair gave me clarity about the fact that we hadn't been happy for a long time. It's been 7 years since we split, and our daughter is incredible. We co-parent beautifully together. He married his co-worker, they have a 2-year-old together, and she's a great stepmother to my kid. My career has taken off and I'm remarrying later this year. I am so grateful he asked for the separation and for the person I became after my divorce. Cheating isn't always this black and white thing people make it out to be. Time heals all wounds. I know this person clearly had a lot of time to reflect and contextualize how things ended the way they did, and I'm glad that everyone seems to have walked away from the situation to better lives. Still don't condone cheating of any kind though. Cheating is a suck-butt thing to do, and I'm not defending it, but many married people are financially bound together but unhappy. It's the wrong thing to do, but it may go some way toward explaining it in many circumstances. Because people don't cheat because they want a new relationship, they cheat because they want the excitement of a casual relationship and the comfort of a long-term relationship at the same time. If I'm trying to put myself in a cheater's shoes, then the 3 reasons I would assume are 1. Lust. This form of cheating is physical and not much thought put into it. 2. Happiness. This is when someone feels trapped, marriage, kids, history, and just wants a moment to escape and relies on the affair partner to make them happy. 3. Safety net. Cheaters think about it this way. Why would you leave a job without having another job lined up already? It ensures that they won't go through a period of feeling undesired. From my understanding, the reason for cheating and staying in a relationship can be a myriad of reasons. Some people have such low self-esteem that the minute they get any attention from someone else they consider attractive, they have a hard time shutting them down. Others have a very separate idea of a stable love from a committed relationship and attraction from a fling. In these scenarios, the perpetrator still loves their partner, but they fall victim to their personal issues and betray their partner's trust. Others, however, are more narcissistic and view their staying in a relationship despite cheating as a favor to their partner. Others still may come from very traditional backgrounds and feel they can't leave their relationships despite no longer loving them. All of this doesn't even account if there are children in the picture too. Do people really not get this? People don't want to be single or in a new relationship. They want all the perks of their existing relationship plus the thrill of something new. They aren't trying to be fair or considerate or reasonable. They want everything they already have plus more, and they think they'll get away with it so no one will get hurt. Yeah, I pretty much completely agree with everything this person says, but this is already a downer topic, so I'm not going to get too deep into some of this stuff. Emotional immaturity and codependency. It's easier to let go of someone when someone else desires you. Basically, they want out and they've made up their mind about it. You may have no clue yet. They're not interested in working through issues. They're done. So to make things easier for themselves, they cheat. This way, they're getting the attention their low self-esteem needs from outside the relationship and no longer have to regard your feelings. They expect you to be upset when you find out. In fact, that feeds their low self-esteem even more. Your anger, confusion, and disappointment makes it more likely you'll say or do something in retaliation. Any such action on your part makes it easier for them to justify in their own mind that they were right in choosing to leave you. To them, things ended a long time ago, so they don't really see it as cheating. They use cognitive dissonance to cope with how they feel about themselves. Pointing this out to them doesn't help them, and especially doesn't help you. In fact, the bigger of a deal you make it, the more you'll be gaslit. Don't expect fairness or accountability from this person. If it goes public, you're likely screwed, as people who are capable of convincing themselves they're in the right in this kind of situation have no problem making things up in order to preserve their public image. The best thing to do once you become aware of it is nothing. Anything you do in terms of confrontation will only make things worse. Instead, quietly get your affairs in order until you're in the financial position to cut and run. The person you thought you knew is gone. Think of them like an alien who took over your former partner's body. Lament in private. Cover your butt while you're exposed. Leave on your timeline, never look back or engage. They are now dead to you. Ultimately, people will respect you more for your maturity and you'll give the ex no grounds to come after you. In fact, they may even implode, but that doesn't matter. How they feel doesn't matter anymore. Winning is getting away cleanly. Because one, divorce is expensive, really expensive, and most people can't afford rent and mortgage on one salary these days, plus long-term financial plans will be seriously derailed. 2, change is scary for everyone. Clearly the marriage that now sucks was once a great idea, now it's not, but it was a big deal not to be taken lightly. New relationships are extra exciting, and someone who is married has seen the extra exciting relationship turn into something not great. The new thing has no guarantee, and cheating gives the best of both worlds. 3, maybe there are kids involved. Staying together for the kids is an awful idea, but 7 seconds of getting your noodle wet trumps disappointing your kids for life, unless you get caught. 4, people suck. Everyone has done something they shouldn't have and there is a rush to it. Maybe it was a little white lie. Maybe it was something criminal. Either way, it was the easy way out and you were delighted you didn't get caught. The first time it was difficult but rewarding. The next time was less difficult, but still rewarding. Eventually, it's just rewarding. Monkey branching, too afraid to jump without having something to hold on to. People stuck in emotionally abusive relationships often cheat as an escape. Simply breaking up is much easier said than done due to the amount of psychological control that's usually involved. Because you have to keep the main person around in case the side piece doesn't work out. You have attachment issues. You're financially tied to a person. There are many reasons. None of them are good reasons, but people who cheat don't care. Don't mind me, I'm just thinking about King of the Hill and Nancy Hicks Gribble cheating on Dale Gribble with John Redcorn. There's the bit where they're doing the duck boats and Nancy's all like, no wonder I need 2 men in my life. One of them keeps letting me down. Because you don't want to leave the relationship, you just want to have sex with other people. As a retired serial cheater in my teens and early 20s, this is an honest answer. Some people are legit skeezy. Others are genuinely in love with their partner but also have other asexual needs and don't know how to square that circle. I'm definitely against cheating, but I think it's important to challenge the idea that cheaters are all evil, weak, foolish, etc. Cheating is quite common, even among people who maintain otherwise healthy relationships. I think the cultural fantasy we have that two people can always fully provide for each other's needs and that true love conquers all is really quite childish, a fairy tale. Certainly it is not 100% impossible for two people to be able to meet most of each other's needs. It can happen, but it's incredibly far from universal. I don't think that everyone should be polyamorous, but I do think that many people really need to be and should, and that some people need to be but don't have any of the skills necessary to manage polyamorous relationships. I've never cheated, by the way. Psychotherapist Esther Perel has a lot of really intelligent and useful stuff to say about this topic. She's helped a lot of relationships come back from that place of broken trust, and she is much better than me at explaining why cheating doesn't necessarily mean that the cheater is a bad person or doesn't love their partner, and at explaining why our current cultural views of romance and relationships really set a lot of us up for failure. Which is not to say that all cheaters are loving, good people. They are certainly much more likely to not be than the average. My point is more that it's not a universal thing, and we should be looking more deeply into this. So I briefly looked into who this Esther Perel person was because I was interested. And in the brief time I've been looking this person up, I probably can't exactly make that many assumptions about who they are or anything or what their theory is exactly, but I don't particularly like what I'm hearing from them in their talks and whatnot. Maybe it's just my principles getting in the way of me being enlightened by these groundbreaking ideas, and I say that with quotation marks. It all sounds very intelligent in that they've mastered the oratory arts, they're just a very good speaker, they have chosen the perfect words to get their argument across and everything, but at the same time there is just a lack of morality, it seems, and even awareness that cheating, infidelity in itself is just inherently cruel to do to an individual who isn't aware or casually and callously abusing the relationship and whatnot. God damn, just open up a frickin' dialogue. Also, if you're interested in this author's ideas, go check them out yourself because I'm not slandering them. I'm more just wondering how this person became, and I quote, a national authority on modern relationships? I love my partner and would die for her, but I haven't been asexually attracted for a very long time. I get through sex with her because of the love, but I don't look at her and see someone that I find attractive. I wish I did, and I'm mad at myself for not, but I can't help it. Breaking up has a lot of consequences that people don't want to deal with. If they live with their partner, they'll probably have to move out, which is a headache and expensive. They might depend on their partner financially and can't afford to break up, or they aren't willing to give up their current lifestyle/income. It will be really hard on the kids if they have any, and so they don't want to break up the family. They might lose joint friends and other relationships that they have together, because they will usually side with one or the other. Most divorces are incredibly expensive and taxing for both parties. You could be going in and out of court for months or even years. If you're worried about that last thing, then that's why you should get a prenup. A prenup is a prenuptial agreement that basically says your finances and properties and whatever will be divvied up in this way, and you can both agree that in case of a divorce, no one gets anything. And it's a very good way of sussing out what the person you are marrying's real intentions are and what they value before you get married. What if there is a woman in an abusive relationship with someone she is afraid to leave? If she tells him it's over, he will blow up. If she just sneaks out and leaves and lives on her own, he might find her and still get to her. She has been with this abusive guy so long, she doesn't think she can leave. He tells her how terrible she is, how worthless she is, and that she should be happy that he puts up with her. She might not have an income or money of her own. Some people take care of all the money and only give a bit to their partner when they ask. Let's say this woman meets another man. She meets him at work, she meets him through mutual friends, maybe an old flame looks her up. He is kind to her and she starts to feel like she might matter a bit, like maybe she isn't so awful, but she can't just move in with this other guy. So they start a relationship. She is finding a way to escape and a way to rebuild herself. When she has the self-esteem to leave, she also has a way to maybe get some financial and emotional support and protection. Believe it or not, I would honestly say that if you're with an abusive person, then feel free to cheat on them. If they hit you, if they smack you around, make you feel like crap every day, legitimately abuse loves you, then yeah, you can do whatever the hell you want. If it means you can somehow get out of that relationship, except kill them, because where does that leave you? My mom tried to leave my dad for years. He was an extremely angry person who was physically, emotionally, spiritually, financially abusive. It was bad. Cops were involved a lot during my childhood from domestic disputes. They never did anything. He wouldn't let her leave. She tried. It always ended up with her and my siblings and I being hurt by him. He's got 2 kids me or my siblings have never met from affairs. He told my mom it was her fault. One day, she met someone and they fell in love, and she eventually told him about it. It was a really scary time, but he kicked her out for it. I know that was the happiest day of her life because she finally got away. It's been about 10 years. She's still with that person she met, and I've never thought for 1 second my mom was wrong for cheating. There are a few things more hurtful than cheating. Just be honest and say you want out. That's better for everyone. Also, preserves the would-be cheater's honor. Money. The old saying, it's cheaper to keep him/her. No-fault divorce is being outlawed in a few states. It's hard to believe, but it's turning into a thing. Well, it's better to be a poor man's joy than a rich man's toy. Whoa, take it from me. You ought to see upon that love there's only misery. And it's better to be a man's whole world than a sometimes girl. Ruby Winter's better, for those of you wondering, and I know most of y'all are just here for the Reddit stories and all that, but come on, I'm trying to give you dinner and a show here most of the time. I think people who cheat have tunnel vision and lack of foresight and insight. A friend of mine is a serial cheater. He's always in some sort of relationship that he completely dive bombs into without any thought, and it ends in chaos every time. I think he does it because he enjoys the thrill of it, and also he's terrified to be single. Possibly mental illness plays a part in this. He is financially ruined from his last divorce because of his cheating, but moved in with his new girl within a month. It's so exhausting to watch from the outside. Cheating can be a misguided attempt to address unhappiness within a relationship. Some individuals may struggle with the emotional difficulty of ending a partnership, fearing confrontation, loneliness, or the upheaval of their lives. Instead, they may seek temporary solace or validation through infidelity. However, cheating undermines trust, hurts both parties involved, and can cause long-term damage. While leaving a relationship requires courage and honesty, it provides an opportunity for personal growth, finding a more compatible partner, and fostering healthier connections in the future. I think most of the time cheating is an emotional thing, not a logical thing. I once knew someone who was in a dying relationship. The relationship was going nowhere and she was losing interest in her boyfriend. The right thing to do would be break up with her boyfriend. Instead, she cheated on him and then she almost immediately confessed to him and begged for forgiveness. At a glance, this would look like a passionate mistake and then instant remorse. But in my time knowing her, she always hated taking responsibility or being blamed for things. I have seen her seriously hurt people, including me, to avoid taking blame or responsibility. I think she subconsciously thought that if she broke up with her boyfriend, he'd be angry and he'd blame her. So she couldn't break up with him. She doesn't want that kind of responsibility. But if instead of breaking up with him, she cheated on him, then he would break up with her. Her cheating makes the breakup A, his responsibility, and B, inevitable. So she can't chicken out of it anymore. Note that this plan does not make 100% sense. It's worse to be blamed for cheating than for breaking up. But when she doesn't want to be blamed for something, she really will hurt people, so they will do things that she doesn't want to take responsibility for. Anyways, her plan backfired. Her boyfriend decided to forgive her and give her another chance. A few days later, she broke up with him. It just sounds really vindictive to me at a certain point. Like, God damn, you're toying with people's emotions here. And by the way, I'm not down for cheating in either way. If anyone's got the impression that I'm like, yeah, boys, or anything like that, no, I just think cheating of any kind with anyone just hurts people, and it sucks so goddamn badly. This one just made me sad to read through. Then again, quite a few of these have made me sad lately. I need a happier topic.
Babysitters of Reddit. What were the weirdest rules parents asked you to follow? I was told that the only thing she specifically wasn't allowed to do was eat a bowl of sugar. I mean, babysitter or not, this is just good advice. I wouldn't want to be the person consuming 150% daily value of the sugar intake. I had to change the kid's cloth diaper every 2 hours on the dot. The kid was 6. I assumed it was for some sort of disability or something, but no. His parents just didn't want to potty train him, and the kid was content with being babied. I remember just making the kid put his own diaper on and encouraged him to use the bathroom if he had to go. I never went back. I had to put the kids to sleep with the CD player going. That wasn't the weird part. It was a recording of their parents basically going, "Molly, you are wonderful. You are a star. You're going to shine bright." That isn't super weird, but it was like several hours long, and apparently they listened to it every night. Yes, I have someone watching my turtle while I'm on vacation over Christmas. As a joke, I printed out the daily affirmations, "You are the best turtle," "Your turtle shell brings all the boys to the yard," etc., and said she has to read them to Tammy every day. My friend did not find me funny. No hot sauce after 9 p.m. To give some context, the kid loved hot sauce, but his folks were super overprotective. Maybe they had heard of people eating too much hot sauce and throwing up as it would not settle? Honestly, the kid was made of solid steel. We went to Taco Bell pretty much every time I babysat. My mom told me a story of when she had to babysit during her teenage years. She did it for this religious family whose church did not believe in television or their members watching it. She would bring a portable TV with her to watch once the kids were asleep. The parents came home and they were captivated by it. They would invite her over just so they could watch television. Not necessarily a rule, but the first time I went to their house, they told me about their daughter's very serious peanut allergy. Walked me through the EpiPen, prevention, phone numbers of their neighbors who were doctors. All fine so far. I took this very seriously. But then the mother put her hands on my shoulders and said, "If she dies, we wouldn't blame you. It wouldn't be your fault." While I appreciate the thought, this freaked me out and I was 100 times less comfortable. This has the same energy as going up to someone and just saying, "It's not your fault. It's not your fault," over and over, to the point where it seems less like a reassurance and more of driving them crazy. Asked me to drive their 3-year-old twins around in my personal vehicle for 2.5 hours because, quote, "that's the only way they can nap." No. I simply put the kids in their beds, closed the door, and they were asleep in 15 minutes. Not a rule, but a single mom once told me to use the bat by the door in the event the kid's father comes by and tries to take them. That was pretty weird and uncomfortable. Hippie family. The 2-year-old had no bedtime and no rules. Quote, "She can eat what she wants, no bedtime, and if she falls asleep, leave her wherever she crashed." The parents came home at 2:30 to a toddler eating chocolate cake on the couch with their preferred American Pickers on TV. That's fine, apparently. 6 months later, the mom is very pregnant and asks that when the baby is born, if I could wrangle the toddler while the mom gives birth in a bathtub at home. The 2-year-old was to be in the room watching while I explain what's happening. I left that evening when the parents came home, fried chicken in the toddler's hand, keeping up with the Kardashians on TV, and denied their next request to come sit. As a 20-year-old, I wasn't prepared to see the mess of someone else's home birth. Lady, I'm a babysitter, not an RN. Ask someone else. I used to babysit for this family when I was in high school, in the 80s, and they had no books or reading material of any kind, except that there would usually be like 2 sections of the Wall Street Journal and a running magazine lying around. No books. Anyway, once I went over there and the mom told me like 9 times, begged me not to eat the box of Nilla wafers that was in the cupboard because she needed them for a recipe the next day. Begged. I was like, okay, got it. They're totally safe because I don't even like vanilla wafers. She kept mentioning it, and it was the first thing she asked about when they got home. Can't believe it, this woman got the Nilla wafers. On the opposite end of the spectrum, the family gave me instructions to let their kids drink chocolate milk, which they were otherwise not allowed to have. I think they wanted their kids to associate babysitter time with fun time, so the parents could go out more often. Seemed to work out well for them. The kids both grew up to be successful people. To give him warm milk in a baby bottle right after every dinner. He was a fully functional 10-year-old boy. Edit, to answer some of the questions, yes, he was fine with it. His parents were otherwise normal, as far as I saw. The kid himself was great. His teeth seemed fine from what I could remember. Not that I really would have paid attention to that back then, but I just found him on Facebook, and it looks like he did have braces around 14 to 15 years old. If Brady stands by the door, it just means he needs to go out, open the door, and let him back inside in a few minutes. Brady was a 4-year-old boy. OP, are you sure? Are you really sure that you weren't dog sitting at the time? That might have actually been my mom and little brother. When my brother was 3 to 4, he was learning to pee like a big boy in the big boy potty. Well, Mom turned away for a second to do something, and my brother must have nudged the toilet lid or something because it came down and smooshed his boy parts. He was terrified of the toilet for a year. He told everyone that, quote, "Potty busy," and he refused to use anything resembling a toilet that year. Mom didn't want him to regress back to diapers, so she let him pee off the back porch and convinced him to poop in a little kid's training potty. He refused to pee in it, though. I'm sure anyone that babysat us during that time was confused and concerned. If you like what you're hearing, remember to hit subscribe and check out Am I the Jerk, linked in the description below. Thanks for watching! The mom had me put her kids in their car seats and sit in the driveway with all the car doors open while she just hung out inside the house. 5 hours of me standing in the driveway watching them sit inside their car. Never returned. Edit, I meant to say I never returned to babysit for her again, not that the mother mysteriously disappeared. As for people asking why I didn't take them somewhere, she specifically asked me to just sit in the driveway with them. I also didn't have my driver's license yet, so I couldn't have taken them anywhere, even if I wanted to. The kids were twins who were 4 years old, I think. They were weirdly well behaved and didn't complain about what we were doing. To this day, I have no idea what she was doing inside or why she didn't just let them play in the yard. I am just as confused as you. Oh my god, thanks for asking because you reminded me of a weird thing. The 3-year-old daughter had to watch this VHS tape of a live Fleetwood Mac concert before bed. I was like, okay, cute. That's adorable. 3-year-olds love the weirdest things. She's so quirky, and this'll be fun. But she didn't love it. She always wanted to watch Land Before Time instead, but it was always on the note left for me. Like, pager number, pediatrician, chicken soup for dinner is in the fridge, and watch Fleetwood Mac at 6:30 before bed. Obviously, the family eventually found out I wasn't making her watch it, as I had no freaking reason to believe it was a secret. They were clearly upset by this, and I was never called back to babysit. So that was weird. Wasn't a rule, but on my first day, they sent over an adult male friend of theirs who asked to come in. I said no, and was then told I was being tested and I had passed. This reminds me of the time my dad called our house phone when I was 8 or 9. My parents had gone to the movies and my 15-year-old sister was in charge of watching my brother and I. He called the house and I picked up, and he said in a weird voice, "Hey little girl, is your mom or your daddy home?" And I told him, "No, they went to the movies." And he said, "Oh, okay, well, I'm a friend of your dad's, and he wanted me to drop something off, but I don't have your address. Will you give it to me?" And I started to spit our address out like it was nothing. And in the middle of me saying the street we lived in, my dad yelled, "No, that's so, Caitlin, no. You never, ever give out your address to anyone on the phone if you don't know them." He had called to see how things were going, and just figured he'd see what I would do if he pretended to be a stranger asking where I lived. So anyways, I failed his test, but learned a great lesson. When I was about 14, some friends of my parents asked me to babysit their 9 or 10-year-old son who wanted a boy babysitter. When I got to their house, the mom told me that her son loved poached eggs and asked me to make him a poached egg on toast for dinner. She quickly explained to me how to make it as if it were something really simple and easy. Later that night, after wasting half of their eggs in a hopeless effort to make a poached egg, I asked the kid if he liked scrambled eggs. He said he loved scrambled eggs and ate them without complaint. When the parents came home, I apologized for using up their eggs. They laughed and seemed to appreciate the effort, although the mom explained it again and insisted that it was really simple. I'm almost 40 now, and I still suck at making poached eggs. And it cracks me up that the mom thought a 14-year-old should be able to whip one up based on a few instructions. On the other hand, as a parent, I appreciate the heck out of that kid. Edit. Wow, I love that this has brought out so many good egg poaching tips. Now I need suggestions for hollandaise. Immersion blender. Immersion blender solves everything. Only 2 hours of reading time. To be fair, the mom was a librarian and her 2 kids were adorably nerdy. They had an entire room filled with books, and even then we'd make trips to the library from time to time. The rest of the time was supposed to be outside or doing some activity. It was a super sweet deal too, because she paid not only for her kids to have a pool pass, but me as well. So we basically went every day all summer, and we would play in the pool. One had me feed her 1-year-old only from a freshly opened baby food container. If she only ate 2 or 3 spoonfuls, I was to throw it away, and when she wanted more in 15 minutes, I was to open a new one. I thought it was so she would finish her meal and be full for a while, but she said it was okay to feed her every time she wanted it. I would probably throw away 5 or 6 jars in a 2-hour sitting. They cost more than I usually made for sitting. Time for a babysitter horror story. Babysat for a woman who knew my mom. She had 2 kids, both acted like feral animals, kicked and bit me very hard when I told them no. She had her TV behind a plexiglass thing because they keep breaking TVs. She had locks on the outside of the bedroom door and crib set up that essentially locked the younger kid, 3 or 4 years old, into her crib. It had a top that you pulled down and padlocked the sides. It was absolutely horrific. The kids screamed bloody murder when I tried to get them to listen. Their grandma who lived next door came over. Did she come over to help me out? No, she gave these kids cookies and crap-talked me for not being able to control them. Like it's my fault that her grandkids act like animals and not the fact that their mother apparently treats them like animals and she herself gives them treats when they have temper tantrums instead of putting them in timeout like a normal person. Their mom promised to be back by 9, important because I was in high school. She wasn't back until 2 a.m. and that was after I started calling all the bars to find her. I was planning to eat dinner afterwards, so I was starving. I called my mom and she ordered delivery for me. The grandmother got angry that she didn't order enough for the kids too and guilted me into sharing it. The mom finally came home, paid me $10 for 10 hours of babysitting, even though we agreed on $20 for 5 hours, and she proceeded to crap talk me next time she went out, saying I was lazy and a bad babysitter. She said I should have beat their butts and locked them in the bedroom when they started acting up. Edit. My mom and I contacted Child Protective Services afterwards a few times. Unfortunately, nothing came of it. Where I live, they give people 24 hours notice before inspecting a house, so I'm sure she was able to hide whatever, or they just gave her a warning, I don't know. I never babysat there again. Not a babysitter, but my friend was 24 and his parents asked him to watch their house while they were gone. They left a list of rules and instructions. It was on a laminated paper and looked like something for a 10-year-old. He was not allowed to answer the door, and if someone kept knocking, he was to call the cops. The mother asked me to stop by the house to meet her 2-year-old son a week before I was supposed to babysit him for the first time. I pulled up to the house and saw that the young boy was standing at the glass front door with a t-shirt on and nothing else. I go in and I must have given the child a strange look because the mom started to explain that her son doesn't like to wear pants, so they let him run around pantsless with no diaper on, though he isn't potty trained. I told her that this made me uncomfortable and asked if I could put pants on him when I was watching him, and she got upset with me and said that they don't like to make their 2-year-old son do anything he doesn't like to do, so they let him run around without pants on, which unfortunately means he goes to the bathroom on the floor since he won't wear a diaper and he isn't potty trained. Not a rule, as I only went there once, but a very odd request. I used to work housekeeping at a hospital. A doctor that was frequently on the floor that I worked on asked me if I could watch his kids on Saturdays. He had 3 toddlers, ages 2, 3, and 4. His wife didn't work, but wanted time to go shopping and get her hair and nails done. I totally understand, as my son was 4. I was also allowed to bring him. I get there early as the doctor is getting ready to leave. He says he's cooking breakfast, and while he gets the kids fed and dressed, could I help change his wife's tampon? She drank a lot the night before and was completely passed out and was leaking and messing up their sheets. He's a doctor! I told him I should work for someone more than a few minutes before I go rummaging in their private parts and that I'd tend to the kids if he tended to his wife. What I really wanted to do was leave, but the kids would be home alone with their hungover mother, so I chose to finish cooking and stay. He went upstairs and sent the kids to the kitchen, where I was putting food on plates. After a little while, he popped his head in and said it was a short day. He was done upstairs and he was leaving. I never met the wife. He came home at noon, gave me $100, and I never spoke to him again. One woman I found through care.com was just generally pretty weird. Some of the weirder things were, only let the kids have 3 spoonfuls of peanut butter each. The boy might want to throw softballs at me. Just try to catch them to avoid getting hit. Also, if he doesn't want to brush his teeth, just hold him down and do it for him, even if he's screaming. Also, both times I babysat, she didn't tell me when she'd be home, and didn't show up until the middle of the night totally wasted. The first time she forgot to pay me, and I was too nervous to say anything, so she had me pick cash up from her mailbox later in the week. She shorted me $5. The kids screamed, hit, fought, and made messes the whole time, and wanted me to chase them around the yard with sticks. I did not. I also stopped going there. Get ready for a creepy story. I was 13 and was babysitting my neighbor's kids. It was my first time, so the parents walked me through all the rules about the bathroom and TV and food and bedtime, etc. Just as the parents were taking off for the night, the mom came back in and whispered to me, "Don't go into the basement." As a teenager in the 80s, my mind went to all of the scariest movies that had basements. I avoided the door to the basement all night until I had put the kids to bed. Then, I walked slowly to the door and put my ear against it. I heard what sounded like whimpering. And then, it sounded like sad laughing. I ran to the couch and started watching TV to get my mind off of it, but then I heard something fall in the basement and knew someone was down there. I really don't know how I got the courage/stupidity to do it, but I went over and opened the door. The whining instantly got louder. I went down just 3 or 4 stairs so I could peek down, and I saw a goat. Not a ghost, a goat. As soon as the goat saw me, he started bleeding loudly. It scared the crap out of me. I went upstairs and the goat was still bleeding loudly. So much that it woke up the kids. The oldest girl came out and said, "Did you open the door to the basement?" I said, "Yeah, why?" She said, "When you do that, Carlos thinks you're going to feed him and he starts yelling." Thank God I knew it was a goat first, because if she had said that before I went down, I would have thought Carlos was some kidnapped person in the basement who would yell for food. It became very funny to me. The mom came home and I told her what happened, and she almost died of laughing. They were repairing the goat pen and had to keep him in the basement for a few days. I still remember every moment of that night vividly. Edit, since a lot of people were asking, I think she told me not to go into the basement that way, either to mess with me, or she was so used to telling her daughters not to go down there that she didn't even think of how creepy it would sound to someone else. I bet that goat was probably driving her crazy over the last week. I never really had any rules to follow, but I did have one terrible mother. The mom asked me to babysit her 3 kids overnight. As I was in high school, I couldn't do it, so she said she could be back by 9 p.m. I figured it was fine and let my mom know, even though they only lived a few houses away. The kids were great. We played around, watched a movie, I fed them, and put them to bed. 9 p.m. rolls around and the mom was nowhere to be found. She hadn't left a number to reach her, and I figured she was just running behind. I cleaned up and watched some TV while waiting for her. 10 p.m. hits, not home. 11 p.m., nope. Finally, at around 12 a.m., I call my mom. I explain what's up, that I'm tired and have school in the morning, etc. She agrees to come and stay at the house with the kids till their mom shows up. Turns out, she didn't come home until around 10 a.m. the next morning, long after my mom had called Child Protective Services. She gave my mom $20 for 16 hours of babysitting. None of the neighborhood kids were allowed to babysit for her after that. When I was a kid, I got paid $75 a week to watch 2 boys over a summer. It was amazing money, but the dad was a big bow hunter, and he made loads of deer chili, and he insisted that his 10-year-old and 2-year-old eat tons of it. They loved it, but the 2-year-old would take these massive, awful, horrible, nasty chili dumps constantly. The dad explained all this to me, and my instructions were to just put him in the shower and hose him down. I was offered plenty of chili, but never ate any. I was babysitting a 3 to 4-ish-year-old girl and an 18-month boy. The boy had to be carried in a buggy, which is all very well, but I was supposed to add some kind of mini stairs, 2 steps on the back of it, so the girl could stand on it because her legs get tired, said parents while making quotation marks with their fingers. The darn thing hit my legs every time I took a step. That kid was also taught to not wait and look for restrooms when she needed to go, and proceeded one time to take a dump in a public garden and wipe herself with a leaf with an ease that certified me that wasn't her first time. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.